Welcome to the House of a Video Store podcast. This is going to be episode 250, which is part 2 of our best of 2019. So the prior episode, we touched on Ready or Not a little bit because we had planned to do that as a standalone episode, but because of timing, didn't do it. And these episodes got so long. So this is part 2, which covers the movies. And then includes what our HBTVS horror movie of the year is, what our number one movie. And then we discuss our personal top movies across all genre movies. So that's all in this episode. Like I said, in the prior episode, we did discuss the new format of the podcast going forward after this episode. So after 250. So that was in the prior episode if you didn't catch that. But basically, we're going to monthly. It'll be released once a month. We need to figure out the exact timing, but we're probably trying to aim for like the first Tuesday of each month, maybe.
And not tied to a specific film. And
more of a general discussion where we cover multiple things. And we might do for a specific film, do a smaller video, go straight to YouTube where you don't have it as much of a time lag and be a full 2-hour description, more of just like a quick 10-minute discussion or something. So that'll be the format going forward. Yes, we discussed it in the prior episode. So this one is all of our top movies. And we discuss the one, like big blockbusters, horror, and our personal favorites. So all of that is in this episode. So it begins now. So now movies. So getting into the movies of 2019. So I kind of broken these out a little bit. So we haven't spent a ton of time on any of these, but it's funny looking back at what all came out this year. And it's like, oh, that was this year. So Godzilla, King of the Monsters was a 2019 release.
I almost forgot, but I rewatched part of that last night because my daughter, she said, I want to watch Godzilla. And I said, which one? She said, the original or whatever, which she thinks that is King of the Monsters, because I showed her that one first because she liked King Kong a lot. But when we watched some of the old Godzillas too, but I put that on again. I'm like, hell yeah, I like this movie. Like I liked it in theaters, as dumb as it was.
I mean, it's a fun movie. It's very forgettable.
It's easy to turn on though and just be like, hey, look at these monsters fight. It looks really good. I like the way I like a rubber suit Godzilla, as well. But it is like, oh, I like seeing this huge budget Godzilla monster movie. The stupid quips. They're so dumb in the theater. It was like, this is so stupid. But also, I'm fine with that. This is a movie I just want to turn on. And those stupid quips are like, you laugh at them and they fill in the gaps and at least something's happening.
Well, you know what I mean? The element of person has a plan that needs a lot of stuff to happen for it to actually work.
The enemy's plan.
At all.
I just love the stupidity of that movie.
Because there's a lot of these movies where the plan, it's like, look, if anybody acts like a normal human being, this plan doesn't work. We need somebody to do this and do that. Yeah. And then, it's one of those things where they thought that Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things, since that's such a phenomenon, that she alone could carry the film on her name recognition.
And the thing is,
she wasn't prominent.
Is it Kyle Chandler, the dad?
Yeah.
Him and her are back for Kong versus Godzilla 2. And I'm like, look, they didn't annoy me in this film, but why even bring them back? You know what I mean? Like,
I think with Stranger Things season 3 being such a huge success, that maybe this time around, if you give her a more prominent role, then maybe
make her 11, then the people will like it. If she can lift up a Godzilla with powers.
I forgot who's directing the new one.
The Godzilla King of the Monsters directed by Michael Daugherty, who did Trick or Treat and Krampus. Then Godzilla versus King Kong was directed by Adam Wingard, who had done The Guest. And You're Next
got pushed back to 2021.
I think I looked up. I think it said November 20th.
I thought it got
you may be right.
So I thought that they were doing a little bit of, but like
they started releasing the toys
and the teasers and stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, King of the Monsters. I'm glad that movie exists. I had a fun time watching it in theaters. Very stupid, but
it's fun.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. So movies, like just sitting there, you think about it, it's like, oh, it's kind of easy to forget all this stuff came out. So we also had Avengers Endgame, Captain Marvel.
Which that's something I forgot came out.
SpiderMan Far From Home. And then, of course, Star Wars Rise of the Skywalker. Mm-hmm. So, like, these huge... And then there's also the Disney not live action, but the photorealistic CG version of The Lion King, and they did
Aladdin,
the live action Aladdin. So it's funny to forget about how much big tentpole stuff. And there was like the new Frozen movie, and wasn't Toy Story 4 this year?
Yeah.
Toy Story
also
4
had Terminator and
Terminator Dark Fate.
You saw Terminator.
Yes,
You liked that quite a bit,
I liked
right?
it quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to get to it, and there was like, what else came out that weekend? There was something else that came out that week. It was something we did for the podcast.
There's so
I think.
much stuff.
Right, William?
Yeah,
I saw Lighthouse that week, I think.
So it's just like they've had you have all these big franchise films.
John Wick 3 also.
John Wick 3.
You didn't see that, did you?
No, I've only seen John Wick.
I've heard. Oh, really? You didn't see part 2?
No.
Oh man.
John Wick is just one of those things I want to watch, and then I just never had the urge to put it on.
Halle Berry's so cool in that third one. I was
maybe I watched the third. I can't remember. I've watched so much.
The third one's with.
stuff.
Wait, I thought you skipped the second one and watched the third one.
I think
Halle Berry's
podcast.
Yeah, I watched the third one. I didn't watch the second.
Apparently, the third one is on HBO now, which I'm going to give that a watch.
Yeah, so
and they're making a fourth that's coming out the same day as the Matrix sequel.
Yeah.
Which is so weird.
They have to change that.
Keanu tentpoles on the same day.
There's no way they can keep
films.
that. It's just who's going to blink first. You can't have the same actor in 2 franchises on the same day.
I mean, it's good for him, I guess.
Good for him, but I don't see there's any way
if I had unlimited time, I would be more than happy to do a Keanu double bill of John Wick 4 and The Matrix. So I would love to do that.
We both
on opening day.
We've all three watched Endgame. We've all three watched Rise of Skywalker. Right?
Yeah.
So, just real quick, because I didn't get to talk about
we won't get into it too far. I know, but we're just warning people.
There's just criticisms of the Skywalker where the same thing exists in Endgame. And if I watch both of those films, like I don't think one's any better than the other. I think they're both the big problem I saw a lot of people is, well, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker had a lot of fan service. And it's like Endgame was literally 3 hours of fan service.
Here's the thing, I think sometimes people point to that stuff and not realizing. They use it like, oh, I don't like it and I don't know why, but it's because of the fan service. But maybe if it doesn't work for you, is it organic or something? Well, and I think Avengers, it is organic. It's
some of it's not.
You know what they're doing, but I don't know. It's fun in that for me, and it's like, oh, this is a journey over the past 10 years. Many kids that grew up with this series.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, the fan service now is from 40, kids that are 60 years old now or 50 years old now, but. For me, and two, just the moment to moment, I think Avengers is way better than the Star Wars film. I think the dialogue is like moment to moment on the Star Wars film. It was just like, man, I can't believe they made this movie. I think
the problem with Star Wars,
dialogue is just alone.
The reason why people feel that way is because it's the same dialogue you get in an Avengers movie. It's the same.
No.
They changed it. They're similar.
No. I think that the way it's so clunky in the exposition, it is very clunky dialogue. I think it's like Avengers. I mean, everybody is charismatic. Everybody has, at least in the Avengers, many of the characters, the dialogue they have is dialogue that makes sense for that specific character. And yeah, of course, Star Wars has some of that, but so much of it could be delivered by anybody, and even the way it's said. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's just, you could have had anybody say these lines and it would have fit. At least in Avengers, everybody has characterizations, and there's such strong characters. You can almost predict how each person would react to the situation.
Well, that can also happen when you have 23 films?
Everybody's going to have their thing, but I'm just saying. I think even looking at the dialogue in Last Jedi versus the dialogue, even the way Luke Skywalker shows up and how he's written, he's so hammy in this one.
It's a lot different.
I think that is easy to see just because of the contrast. But everybody is. I think the dialogue drop is like that for almost every single person, and just shoehorning Leia in there, I just think that.
Well, I think a lot of what they did, a lot of the difference in the way that, say, Rise of Skywalker and Avengers Endgame landed, and there's something too where I think, regardless of the quality between the two movies, it's like, these big series-ending movies, and it's funny because I'd rewatched the Lord of the Rings series with Julie recently, like the extended editions. And I hadn't rewatched that series. I'd watched the individual movies off and on, but I hadn't rewatched the entire series in like a decade, because it was like, they came out in 2004 with Return of the King. Mm-hmm. And in that movie, the original Star Wars series, a lot of stuff when you have a trilogy, when you get to the end of the last movie, it leaves you feeling something because you just watched the story conclude. Endgame really didn't do that. This one, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, definitely didn't do that.
Endgame did it for me.
I just don't. I think that it was a good movie. I think that it was a fun experience, and it kind of wrapped that up. I don't think anybody's going back to that in 10 years and watching it.
I watched it again.
There's no,
but part of the reason is like the difference between like say Rise of Skywalker and Avengers Endgame is Avengers Endgame was part 1 of 2 from the same creative team for a specific purpose that capped off a series where there has been some vacillations in how characters are handled. But the Star Wars movies, each movie fought with the prior one in terms of what they're trying to do.
But still,
I don't really feel like they fought. I feel like with Force Awakens, that was what it was, and it's so good.
No, it's the
Last Jedi didn't fight
Force
against
Awakens set up. We're going to do a J.J. Abrams mystery box.
I don't want to dig too. I don't want to spend because some people probably don't even care about this. But everybody go through and say their piece real quick. I think a good screenwriter can take what was given, even in the prior film and Last Jedi or whatever. Rian Johnson, I think, jumped off Force Awakens well. He could have jumped off. They could have jumped off this well. They didn't. You know what I mean? When it comes down to it, the canvas was almost blank. They got the Jedi text literally. That was like a gift of like, hey, even Skywalker was like, oh, I didn't read those. Like they could have expanded the world so much and been like, hey, there's these things we didn't know about, these ancient texts, and they could have done so much with that. They had a blank canvas, and we got the most clunky and generic like setup in an action film.
I think what happened,
along with terrible dialogue.
I think what you saw was scared filmmaking. I think what it was is you saw filmmakers. I do not think it was a bad movie because I've watched a lot of the big releases, and I just finished before I watch. I literally watch every single Star Wars movie. This is better than any of the prequels. Still, the prequels are just outside of Obi-Wan Kenobi. They are almost unwatchable. I mean, they are bad.
Oh yeah.
And so this is still better than that.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
I think it's still better than a vast majority of our singular MCU movies. Still better than majority of anything DC's put out. I think this is much more enjoyable than Justice League or Aquaman or a lot of the other stuff they've put out. I just think what happened with that is you had such a turn from The Last Jedi, which was, I think, an actual film with something to say, and kind of flipped everything on its head and went in on these characters and actually made them fleshed out. Then this movie, you get it, and it's like, okay, we gave the fans what they didn't really want, and by fans, I mean like 10 fat dudes in the basement that are upset because they had an Asian woman in the movie, and they're like, okay, we're going to diminish her role. We're going to give you everything you wanted, and then they got what they wanted, and it isn't what they wanted. Because you can't make them happy. Well, so you make a movie to be good, you don't make it to make the fans happy.
I think part of it, though, is if they were only making one new Star Wars film, if they'd only made one film from beginning to end, like The Last Jedi works as, because I wasn't a huge fan of what it did, like, ultimately, it is a better written, directed, and more focused film than the other two in the series, but it does not work as part 2 of a 3-part arc. It is its own contained thing that basically said everything that was set up in the prior one doesn't really matter, and now we have no conflict going forward.
I don't think it did that.
It basically said it's Kylo Ren just sitting here being broody, and then there's like 15 people in one ship. That's the story.
I disagree. I think a skilled screenwriter could have thought of a million different things to do with that third one. I think it's an
interesting dynamic, but I think what I like about this is seeing all the issues people took with the Rise of Skywalker, just opposed to all the Endgame issues that you have, where Thor is, I thought when you go back and look at comedy as a whole over the past, let's go to the 50s and 60s. Let's go to the Rat Pack era. Funny, fat alcoholic. That was funny in the 60s and in the 70s. Then we got away from that in the 80s and 90s and 2000, 2010.
Yeah, but
that's not funny anymore. So then you reintroduce, okay, how we do this character? Let's make him a fat, drunk, depressed alcoholic. That's Thor now. And it's like, it's weird to see that.
It's a visualization of his depression because he's sitting there drinking.
But it's played for laughs.
It is in contrast, but it is in contrast. It is not making fun of just some schlubby person. It is making contrast of the person that was built up in even the first, Avengers Infinity War, of being next to Chris Pratt and then being like, oh, he's this perfect specimen. I think the contrast is what's funny, and we saw his depression and everything, how it hit him, and also how he could, even though he still kind of looked like that, he could still be a hero and had his redemption.
But it's funny to see.
I think it was written well for what those films were. I think they were just handled so much better.
So I think part of it is, like, in addition to scared filmmaking, it's more reactionary filmmaking. And I think it's just that the fact, like, I don't want to spend too much time on Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
You just say this and we'll go on.
I think the point is, it seems, like, everybody's like, oh, it's not their fault. I don't know that you have to have a blueprint or a plan, but I think you need a guiding hand through the movie so you can at least say, like, I love what you're doing here, but how does this fit in because if you're making a trilogy, if you're making a 3-movie arc, you should probably at least have some idea how it's going to follow through from movie to movie and not between the films react to what the reaction was. If you have a story you want to tell the story. Don't let fan reaction guide it, because when the first Star Wars movies came out, there was a negative reaction to Empire Strikes Back, and it was the best movie of all those. I think The Last Jedi is great because of the greatness of Empire Strikes Back. I'm just saying, so Empire Strikes Back, people had a negative reaction to it when it came out, but I think they already had the third movie in plan and didn't really change their plans because of that. They just continued on. And I think with Star Wars, even though I didn't like what they did with Last Jedi in a lot of cases, I think they should have continued on whatever that path was and not done some reactionary thing that gave them a very disjointed story from movie to movie.
I think, too, though, when you have a predominant character in your movie that is, like with Carrie Fisher, and they pass while you're doing that franchise and you don't have a backup plan.
It is kind of an unprecedented curveball. I think
that really
they knew she, love her, but I think her health risk was when known. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Her,
What they should have done is they should have just, instead of sticking to release schedules, they could have delayed The Last Jedi for a year and thought about in the context of the overall series if they wanted to redo.
Here's where you're wrong, though. It's Disney. You know what I mean? They have investors. They wanted to get those films out. Yeah. They were not going to hold any of those films to make a big plan. They wanted to get those out as soon as possible. And it doesn't matter. These things will print money. Didn't print as much as they thought, in every part of the world. But I'm just saying. I understand working in the business where they have that mindset of hitting quarterly earnings, but in the process of doing what they've done, they've diminished the brand. Oh, I totally agree.
If they had just taken a year off and said, you know what, let's kind of fit some of Carrie Fisher stuff that we were planning for the third movie into this second film and kind of conclude that arc.
I would have been mad, though, if I was Rian Johnson and I wrote a script as tight as that. You know what I mean? Because he wasn't just like Rise of Skywalker, he wasn't putting a bunch of stuff okay, now we got to just cut this down. He wrote a thing. He had a couple scenes he cut.
But at the same time, I understand.
I would hate to have some of my story taken away from me just to service something else.
But at the same time, if you have a 3-movie arc and your main character dies, it was going to be the huge part of the third film.
You just cut them out. You can take a left turn.
Well,
it's problem solving. It's take a left turn, man. It's just say, hey, they passed away. And so anyway,
a lot of the things they did poorly across the 3 films.
I still liked it a lot.
All right, so another film. What else you want to hit next?
So those are all the big. It was John Wick 3 was a big hit, far more than anybody thought. They went from little action movies with Keanu Reeves to being one of the larger grossing action films of the year.
Let's hit on Spider-Man real quick. I have one thing
very quickly.
This is another complaint against MCU. They took the most blue collar, normal superhero, and then they turned him into a patsy. They take it. So Spider-Man. They took what makes Spider-Man work, and they said, "Screw it, we're not doing that." And then
it's one of those things where the movies in and of themselves are fun when you're watching them. Yeah. When you sit and think, the entire core of Spider-Man, which the working Spider-Verse still did this very well. Yeah. The idea of Spider-Man is he's the Everman. He is the the Spider-Verse even made it anybody can be Spider-Man. It's not just Peter Parker, but the idea is it's the downtrodden normal person without a lot of resources with a normal life balancing school and work and relationships and family, and they're struggling and failing and trying to come through in the end and do the right thing and all the responsibility. That's the core of that character.
Now he's Batman.
But now essentially what they've done is they made him the inheritor of a billionaire's, he got his suit from a billionaire. He got his equipment from the billionaire. He got a multifunctional space attack missile system. There's all this stuff where it's when you think about it, because that one tweet that I had shared with you all, I was like, oh shit, they really did take everything that Spider-Man was and change it. Yeah. And they kept he's fun and in school and stuff, but it's the entire point of him was that he struggles to get by. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and watch the Sam Raimi movies,
it's all about the struggle.
He's living in a tiny, tiny dungy apartment, working a pizza delivery job. There's all these things that is the core of the character. And it's like, yeah, it's really easy to forget how they've really streamlined this and taken away a lot of the core of what that character was. At least with Spider-Verse, they gave you the schlubby living in a studio apartment or Spider-Man that is essentially just the 15 years later version of what Tobey Maguire
would have been, yeah.
And it's like, I like that. I want to see that more.
That's far more interesting.
If they made a Batverse movie, they'd be like, oh, actually, they all have to be rich because you'd have to be rich. This Batman.
I just think it's an interesting dynamic.
It's uniquely Spider-Man, you know. Yeah,
So,
Superman could only be Superman. There can be different ones from different planets, but Batman's got to be rich. Superman's got to be super powered. You know, Spider-Man's got to be able to shoot web. But essentially, yeah,
it's interesting what fan bases will pick and choose over when you just give them something that.
It's easy to get.
You give them I'm trying to think the right word to say. So you give them like a tasty movie,
an enjoyable
movie that's maybe not great, but it's not bad. It's how much more they would.
Well, it's like you give somebody cake for dinner.
That's blockbuster filming.
You give somebody cake for dinner, and then 2 in the morning, like, oh crap, I've had no substance all day.
Is that all the big films you hit?
Yeah, before we get like the more horror stuff.
I'll hit some bigger stuff that I watched recently, but. Before we get to like some of the best stuff. So Child's Play was another one that came out this year.
Well, I had all that like in the horror stuff.
Okay. So let's see here. Under the Silver Lake. So that was directed by, what's his name?
Robert Mitchell did It Follows.
Yes. That film kind of stuck with me. It takes big swings, and some of it feels, there's one scene in the film that feels like it should be straight out of a Kojima game, like a Metal Gear Solid. Almost, you know, the whole like Patriot stuff. Like there's this wild like
the lolly low.
Yeah, all of a sudden this guy shows up and he starts giving this monologue, and you're like, oh my God, this is like a Kojima moment, and it is so awesome. And his character's so weird, like he would be in a Kojima game, and like the things he's saying, and it's even this game. So this is he's basically trying to solve this mystery of a conspiracy in Silver Lake in California, and it's very uniquely like people in their 30s. You know, he lives in his apartment, and he's schlubby like Spider-Man. Say it's Andrew Garfield, and there's even some conspiracy. Like he's getting into conspiracy theories. He's meeting with people. He's following leads like in a mystery noir film too, because some girl comes to his house and then it leads him down this path. And then all of a sudden, we essentially get to one point where he's pulling out his Super Mario Brothers 3 player guide and using tracing paper and figuring out there's coded messages in the player's guide on how the level is made. Like it just gets so crazy. Like it goes wild places, and it too is about like he is making a commentary on this stuff just as much. So even if some things maybe don't connect right, you're thinking, well, what was he saying about that? You know what I mean? And he is saying stuff about it. So it has wormed its way into my head. And I really like that film. And even moment to moment, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think it's great actually. Marriage Story I thought was really good. Adam Driver, he's excellent. You know, it's probably not my favorite Baumbach film, but yeah, I love the stuff that's hitting streaming that is great. You know, Dolomite Is My Name with Eddie Murphy was phenomenal. I love movies about making movies. Rudy Ray Moore, just a really fun film, really funny, kind of touching. Love seeing Eddie Murphy in a great role again, you know, because it's been a while.
Been a long time.
Not the same thing, but what is the film he made with Steve Martin?
Bowfinger?
Bowfinger, yeah. Bowfinger was so great. And, you know, I don't know if this reaches Bowfinger as far as comedically at times, because, I mean, it's hard to, Bowfinger is phenomenal, but this film I think is definitely a must watch, especially because it is on Netflix. And then some other films.
We haven't talked about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Well, so I have a section of like things that we can include in our best of that aren't necessarily horror, but are like.
Okay, well, I'll touch on my best of stuff along with all those then. I think because
I try to section out so
let me know before you hit that though, because I got a bunch of other horror that does not fit in the best of. Just in case you missed any.
Yeah, so like big horror stuff. So just kind of going through. So Dr. Sleep, It Chapter 2, One Cut of the Dead, Midsummer, Ready or Not, The Lighthouse, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which I kind of forgot was this year until I was like, oh, that was September.
Yeah.
Pet Cemetery, again, I was like, oh, that was this year? It was April. Child's Play, Us. I was like, oh, Us was this year too. The Dead Don't Die, Velvet Buzzsaw, the Ted Bundy Netflix movie that's so long I don't ever remember its name.
Which I did not like that one. We did.
I was just trying to think of like horror stuff.
I'm just dropping a comment because we're not probably going to talk much about that. I liked My Friend Dahmer though, which that isn't really
that was
horror.
from like 2016 or something.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, we watched it this year, but that was from years ago.
Oh, okay. That's what it was then. Let me delete that.
Sabrina.
Yeah. So those are kind of like the big. Is there something?
The Perfection also. I mentioned that because
that was this year.
Because I liked how weird that was. And then, it was
a weird movie.
And then Piercing, I watched that from Nicholas Pesh, who just did The Grudge, and he did Eyes of My Mother before. I watched The Grudge. Jumping in real quick, just on Piercing, that film, I didn't realize too, I knew it was based on a book. It's based on a book from the author that wrote the book that Audition was based on, Takashi Miike film. You've seen Audition?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. So you can kind of get where that, the tone and the darkness and everything like that. So essentially, so that kind of leads you down the path, but it is about some guy. Maybe it's about fetishes and it's kind of a sweet love story. Also, it's very dark, but Piercing it's something that stands out, I think. You know what I mean? No, I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 or anything, but sometimes I think the movies that are at least interesting are more valuable than the films that are just middle of the road, you know? So that was one you guys didn't watch that I did Tigers Are Not Afraid.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name of the director, but Spanish language film set in Mexico. Del Toro was a big fan of this. That can kind of tell you it follows down almost a fairy tale-esque horror film set in Mexico.
Which I kind of like that premise because all fairy tales are kind of horror-ish anyway.
Yes, yeah. It's on Shudder. I think I talked about it on a podcast already. So anyway, I wanted to drop those two because I think those are interesting and definitely worth checking out. May or may not be your thing. So, but the other ones I think are ones that's...
because going through, so like a lot of these we've had episodes on, so we didn't spend that much time. Like It Chapter 2 was, a block in terms of blockbuster horror stuff. The first one made, over $500 million. It was like what, $700 million worldwide or something, like 300 and something million dollars domestic. So one of the most, blockbuster franchises you could ever get in horror. That was rated R, which was nice. They kept that. Chapter 2 was not as strong as Chapter 1
because the book is not. That's one of those things where it's like,
well, if they had made it, so I think the only way you could have really made it if you had made Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 concurrently, if you shot them back to back, and then kind of cut it up like the series did with the present and the past parts. If you had done that, you maybe could have made both elements a little bit. You would have made the first one a little bit weaker and the second one a little bit stronger.
Yeah, the way that
it sounds like they should have went further with the adaptation. They should have, you know what I mean, like much like Kubrick did. It pissed off King, but like, hey, because you got to mix some things up.
Because in the book, a space turtle works.
No,
in the movie, it's not going to work as well.
But that, as much as I love it, and it influenced my childhood a lot, watching the Tim Curry version, the TV made for TV, and I've read the book and a lot of this other stuff. Like it is weak. The second half is weak compared to the first half because the first half it's one of those things is as that mystery unravels, it loses its interest. And that's where I think Kubrick's The Shining worked so well because it didn't unravel everything and just give it to you on a platter.
Well, he reconstructed the book. You know what I mean? He what do I think can work for my sensibilities and my way of storytelling and what I want to say?
Pennywise, and you find out that he's a giant, interdimensional spider that eats souls. Like at that point, it's no longer interesting.
Well, and 2, I think,
and it loses the steam that it has.
Something that Chapter 2 does, without spoiling specifically what happens in the end. The ending of it kind of works as one of those kind of Deus Ex Machina, almost like a Harry Potter type deal where it's like something that you've never even thought about that doesn't seem to logically hold any water is how you succeed.
Yeah, it's weak. It's weak.
And it's not even, it's just like...
It seems like the ending to some fairy tale.
The never-ending story.
Fantasy kids film from the 80s.
Because it feels like the never-ending story is the ending to this blockbuster horror franchise.
So, many people were cold on this. You guys, what did you guys feel about it?
I watched it the other day. Like it wasn't bad, but I knew it's weak because
Yeah.
I
Like I
grew up
thought that
watching it.
Bill Hader was great. There was good acting throughout, but it kind of felt weird. Like they had Jessica Chastain's character kind of bounce around from love interest for no real reason.
But it would have made more sense if they went contextually what was in the book originally. It would have made more sense, but being that they didn't go that route, which they shouldn't have, it doesn't. I think weakens her character. It's not as good. And again, a lot of this comes down to, in my personal opinion, the source material for the latter half is weak compared to what you get.
Well, it's not as all. So I think
it's weak.
But I'm not saying that it isn't. I'm just saying a lot of times with horror, you have great openings, and the third act's always this trouble.
Yep.
Because across all great horror, how much do you explain?
People make the argument about a lot of just franchise films.
Well, how much do you explain of the origins of something, and how do you? Because a lot of times, if you just had it end with them destroying Pennywise in a similar way to Chapter 1, it was just like a funhouse scary movie again. It may have been more viscerally entertaining, but people would still be like, "Oh, I didn't explain it."
This is where I think you should take more of the Shining approach, is where they end their story, but they don't end that. They end their attachment to it. It still exists, and they get out, and it just kind of like they come back. I think that's where it's more interesting. Then it keeps going.
So for me, like I kind of went in knowing that, people aren't as hot on this as they are the first one. The first one I had tickets to. My daughter was born that week and we had to return them. This came out 2 years.
You're not having a baby yet.
Almost 2 years. It was like the same weekend essentially, granted a day shift. But so I went there by myself. I was excited. I knew like, okay, I love this cast. And I just had a fun time with it. But also I align this with how I had a fun time with Godzilla King of the Monsters. I like seeing these actors. Yeah. They're over-the-top performances. James McAvoy, like, grabbing that kid and screaming at him. Yeah. Like, the Stephen King cameo I loved. Yeah. Bill Hader, granted, maybe some people weren't even used as much as they could have been, but I liked a lot about this movie. And it was a fun horror film.
Having James Ransom play, so he was really good. So he was playing the kind of OCD kid.
Yes,
the adult version.
A lot of these movies work in the same way as you do. The child element, the youthful stuff, things always scarier when you're a kid. So when you do this movie, things are scarier as a kid because
the original series,
different things are scarier to a kid, and it's the same reason why we don't respond as well to something like a Conjuring or something where it's like, I appreciate it, but it's not really scaring me.
But you see that with this movie is something about that adolescence you can connect with, and it is scary because we all remember as a kid there's different things that scared you and creeped you out, and this played on a lot of those fears from a childhood. Whereas you get to an adult, you're more rational thinking as things and the scariness comes off of it because maybe things in the real world are scarier than that. And that's where I just think the second half
because when you watch the second half, it's like, oh no, did they call this person's significant other or family after this happened? And it's like there's more of those concerns when you're an adult as opposed to when you're a kid, you're just running around. But so it's
there's no way for the second half to be as strong.
And something this is somewhat related, but I was watching I can't think of how to pronounce her name. The Safety Brothers or whatever. Anyway, the directors.
Gaddafi.
Yeah, the directors of Uncut Gems. They were talking about how one of them was talking about the horror they love. The horror films they love are the ones that sneak up on you and scare you in unexpected ways. And I think that kind of hits the nail on the head where it's you go into these films that are funhouse films and you know how you're going to be scared and you're scared. And I think that's why I am more attracted to stuff like Killing of the Sacred Deer, where it's like the things that maybe are horrifying aren't scary in the traditional sense that you think of things being scary when you're a kid, but they put stuff in your mind.
Well,
you know what I mean? And you're thinking about things in a different way. There was also La Dolce Vita. I watched that for the first time this year, Fellini film. And it's not a horror film, but you're watching it and I love that film, but I watched the video essay on the Criterion disc. And it is almost shot like a David Lynch film. It has this ominous sound and tone. And they start talking about a couple shots in the film and what they mean. And I didn't realize that, watching the film, they had a feeling to them, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And all of a sudden they're revealing the intent behind those. And it literally sent a chill up my spine. And I'm like, this has scared me more than any film I've watched this year almost. It was almost in a way of the Sixth Sense, I See Dead People. And when you realize the twist in that film, what that was supposed to do, there are different things that scare me now. And I think, too, that's why for me, we were talking about changing the podcast, but it's like, man, some of these films aren't really made for us. Do we really need to spend time going to theaters and watching, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A film that is targeted for maybe a younger or a different audience. Not even younger, just people that are interested in different types of scares.
Skip to a different movie that we're all discussing, like The Lighthouse. The reason why I think The Lighthouse worked for me is, okay, The Lighthouse plays in two ways. It is, if you told me that Adam McKay directed it, and you gave me Will Ferrell and
John C. Reilly,
the same movie would work in a comedic light. But on this one, it's more of a deranged, like, look into isolation, alcoholism, you know, like.
But it's almost just as funny, just in a different way.
Yes, but it's fun. And then you almost have, like, the fact that these two men, through their isolation, develop a weird, and alcoholism, develop this weird relationship. And don't go
too far in it, because this, if you haven't seen the trailers,
it's of love and hate.
It's one of those.
It's of like, I don't have anybody else but you, but I hate you.
Yeah,
it's one of those really good
funny things where you had said this in watching the movie. So The Lighthouse is essentially if they took like a little 15-second to 30-second bit gag from Family Guy and expanded it into a movie. Yeah. And there's like, because there's one scene I'm thinking about, I won't spoil what it is, but it's like, that scene, if you, like, that could have definitely been like a little cutaway gag on Family Guy, and then you spiral this entire movie out of it.
There's more farts in this movie than most Family Guy episodes.
But see, that's the good thing is because you put these people in like this confined space you can't get away from.
There's one
farting all the time.
There's one line from that movie that I will probably quote to Julie quite often, or vice versa, even though it's like something about a lobster.
Yeah,
but
and somebody also made the comparison, and definitely true, like The Shining, you know, kind of the same feel of this being isolated. You know, they're isolated on an island, not in a house from a snowstorm.
It does
and there's even been some somatic parallels where they've had two shots next to Jack walking with his axe, and another it's almost the same
shot.
One
kind of has the same parallels of just that isolation, alcoholism.
Yeah,
you know, this one's a little more there because they drink alcohol, but you just see the descent like into madness with them and what happens. I think that's an interesting, because it's one of those movies like I only watch it because I just happened to be off work that day. I was like, I had a bunch of movie passes saved up. I was like, I'll check it out. And then when I first finished it, I trashed it. Yeah, I got on them. I was messaging too. It's like, this is just.
We hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I was like, this is just a bougie movie. It's this and that. It's and then the more I think about it, I'm like, but I really like it.
So
I never hated it. It should not be a movie I liked, but
I was surprised
it's so different.
Having the stage
and Robert Pattinson's great in it.
Having that stage set for what the movie is allows you to enjoy it a lot more. But like another movie that I saw and came out, we did an episode on, and then I've kind of changed my view on it after seeing it, was Midsommar. Because when I first came out, like I thought it was well made, and I gave it like 6, 7 out of 10. So I thought like it was good. But then since then, my appreciation or appraisal of it has increased.
Yeah.
Just because the more I thought about it.
We can talk. Let's get into that because I just watched it this morning.
Lighthouse also, like I saw that a little bit after you did, but in theaters. I also really liked it, and that also kept creeping into my mind. Where I liked it when I walked out, but it kept creeping in, and that's definitely on my best film of the year list.
It's funny because like A24 has the A24 podcast where they have like different filmmakers talk to each other. So what's funny is they had an episode with Ari Aster, who directed Hereditary and Midsommar, and Robert Eggers, who directed The Witch and Lighthouse.
And I did not like The Witch.
And it's funny because
like the follow-ups better.
Yes. They're talking about Bergman and all this stuff. It's like, this is the most bougie white dude film.
But I mean,
here's the thing, in the best way.
Yeah, but I mean, like
no knock.
But here's the thing, if you're making films and all you know about cinema and film history is everything that's came out since 1985, then what are you going to do? You're just going to be mimicking that stuff. You know what I mean? You're just going to be creating more of the same,
so what's
but
funny
just
is,
not as
without
good.
going on a huge digression, so you know who Armand White is? No. He's a critic who writes for the National Review.
Yeah.
He's notorious for being like gave Toy Story.
He's the negative guy, right?
So like his top 10 films.
I'm thinking of him, right? He's the one that's really negative.
His top 10 films of the 2010s include 2 Zack Snyder films and a Michael Bay film.
Was he the guy, the only ones that gave Paddington 2 a bad review or something?
I don't.
It doesn't matter.
He said that Transformers 2 is far superior to Inception, and was explaining how if he could break out a moviola, he could explain to you based on film history how it's better. But it's just like, my point with that is he's somebody that in his reviews always reference, like when reviewing some trash Zack Snyder, a movie that I did not enjoy. What was
he will superficially pull out a reference.
He will just say,
without understanding.
The 1932 blah 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 film, Inception copied this directly, so it's trash. And since I have seen this film from 1928, I therefore understand Transformers 2 and how its critique on consumerism makes it a far superior. And so it's like, I hate when people do that. It's like the fact that you have seen old stuff doesn't make you good. But, because not everybody has the resources or the desire to, because some movies from like the 20s, 30s, and 40s are not easy to track down.
I think now we have so many more resources. Like, besides the Criterion Channel, so much of this stuff is just on YouTube.
I'm saying, but just think about how many movies that when you try to buy them on, you can't find them on Amazon and it's $300.
Yeah.
So my point just is, it's one thing just to be like, I'm aware of film history, therefore I'm smarter than you. It's another thing to say, here's what I really liked about that, and here's how it inspired me. Now it made this thing that you would never think is connected, but that was what inspired it. So that's where I'm going with like The Lighthouse and Midsummer, because those are ones where they can reference all this stuff that they were, inspired by, or the look of it, or the lenses.
Well, it's funny you said that.
But most your general viewers don't care.
Most people don't care. They just care about what they're watching in front of them.
But if you are into, if you are deep into looking at cinema that is different than your just typical mainstream blockbuster, you may be going down that path of like, okay, I want to know, just like, literature or poetry or anything. You're like, okay, I'm trying to figure this out. But
I like about
real quick, the A24 podcast, I listened to one with Paul Thomas Anderson and the Sadafi brothers or whatever.
Sadafi.
When I hit play, I forgot what podcast it was, and they even said A24. And then they introduced them, and the voice introducing him, he said that Sadafi brothers, like the two, the most groundbreaking directors, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, damn, they're building them up pretty high. Like, I loved Uncut Gems, and I think it's kind of true, but I'm like, damn, they're acting like they're like one of the best new voices. And then it said A24. I'm like, oh yeah, of course, because they just put out their film. They're going to say, but I don't think that's necessarily wrong either.
I think for me, because I literally watched Midsommar right before this podcast. I got it this morning.
You need to set with that film a little bit.
But the reason why both that and Lighthouse worked with me is because it's the relationship dynamics of both.
And they almost can play as comedies.
They almost can play as comedies.
Yeah, definitely.
But I
They're
think
both really funny.
I think what's the most interesting thing about, and I'm not going to get into full spoilers or anything, but I just, with Midsommar, or Somnar, however you say it, the interesting thing is the failed relationship dynamic and how far people will go. Like, the way that plays is like, you got a failing relationship and then you have a tragedy. So in that tragedy, the person that wants out can't really leave at that point. So they're forced to maybe take someone with them or do something with them that they don't want to do.
But in not letting the relationship end, are they doing more harm?
They're doing more harm.
So but also too, I mean, you could also see how anybody could slip into that. You know what I mean? That's what I think is interesting about it.
It's a very interesting look at the horrors of bad relationships because this movie, when you look at how the trajectory of this film goes, every single step is failure in the relationship. Everything that happens is because failure of relationships from all the characters. I think that's kind of a fascinating look because while there is a large amount of people, you have a core group of 4 people. And every misfortune that happens is because they fall apart in their relationships. And only one person is really able to kind of see that happening. And that's like the lead actress. But at one point, like one of the best scenes, it's awkwardness.
Often
in the movie
a lack of communication or willingness to
But they're sitting there eating and she makes a direct comment about something. And it's like, we've all been there. But the other person just doesn't give a shit. And I think to me, like, you watch it happen, it's like, that is just...
That's horror. That's true horror.
It's true horror. It was phenomenal just to watch it because it's like, if this scene played out any differently, the entire movie is different because one person just honestly does not care.
Yeah.
You see the dive down. And I think it's fascinating.
And two, like, I liked Hereditary, but I gave it maybe an 8 out of 10, 7. It was a little bit, I don't know. It didn't gel with me all the way. And then what was the other film we talked about? Oh, The Witch.
Yeah.
I liked The Witch. I liked what he was going for. But also, too, you can see that, as these directors who are steeped in film history and their minds, they are not worried about, maybe they see everyone, but they're not worried about trying to make the next, big budget action film or Marvel film. Or they're not thinking like, okay, how do I write a script that will fit into this Hollywood model that would, you know what I mean, that I can sell and finance. But you could see it as their first films being like, okay, at least their early films, I can't remember if it's exactly the first one, but them being like, okay, I have all this stuff in my head that I've been thinking about for so long. Now let me really like express this. Well, and it's them getting that stuff out of the way almost. And I think those films are good, but it's like, okay, that stuff's out of the way. Now let me start experimenting and having like it's them lightening up almost. You know what I mean? They take their stuff not as seriously because they are so worried about they want to like do the best job they can and they want to make an impact and they want to make their art, but it'll be interesting to see both their careers grow just based on the first and second film.
But what I like about those movies is they tread that line of either one. It could be a full-blown comedy or full-blown horror.
Yeah.
And the fact that, to me, they kind of do that perfect balancing act and never go one way or the other makes them work so much better because it gives it some groundedness because it's like, you have this real tense, you're in a room maybe the size of this, two men living in there forever.
Yeah.
And you got a poop bucket and somebody's farting in your face all the time. Yeah. And just how at first it's like, it doesn't matter. You do that for 6 months and all you're doing is drinking for those 6 months. That changes that dynamic a little bit.
It's one of those things too where in both cases, so I think Midsummer suffers from a little bit more of logical people would not have stuck in that situation.
You say that.
I think they do a great job of addressing that every time. And maybe personally, some people would react differently, of course. But with the characters in this film, I think those specific characters and their reasonings for staying and everything, I think all of it was enough for me to say, okay.
Like I'm forgetting
every character's arc.
Yeah, William, I know you'd be out there in 2 seconds, but I'm saying
I would never win.
But I'm saying I believe every one of those characters. It was enough to me. They addressed it.
The actor's name, but he's been in other stuff. He was on like Bandersnatch, who was in Midsummer.
No, not Chidi.
He was. I know you're talking about. He's
I think he was in Detroit.
He was in Texas. He was the Texas Chainsaw victim in that movie.
But he was basically playing out the character arc of all of the friends in Troll 2.
And but because what happened to him made perfect sense. Like, okay, because each character kind of got their just desserts in the way that their characters were portrayed. Each of the things
Will Poulter.
Each of their faults is what caused what happened to them.
Well, I don't think he was in Detroit. I might have been.
No, he was.
Was he in Detroit? Okay.
Yes. But my favorite thing was just like, without spoiling the ending, there's a part at the end where there's characters who are doing something that they think is one thing. And then when they're in the middle of it, they're like, oh, this isn't real. No, stop. So it's funny. There's a lot of funny elements. So, but like the movie to me that had like, and I guess it just tells you this perspective of like, as you get older, what scares you, like in terms of horror. So Dr. Sleep, the scary stuff to me wasn't the stuff to do with The Shine or the Shining or any of that stuff. It was like when he was working at the nursing home and like helping people pass away and stuff, which is how I got the name Dr. Sleep. It's like, oh, thinking about the logistics of that is scarier in the realistic, like, he's like, I don't know what there is, but there's something. He's like guiding people. Mm-hmm. So something I think that hurt Dr. Sleep, I'm not sure what you would have called it otherwise, is they called it Dr. Sleep. So it's a name that doesn't immediately, that was a book that was, a Stephen King book in 2012, 13, 14, sometime in the recent past 10 years. And the name wasn't super iconic. And it did well, but it wasn't like a smash Da Vinci Code. Everyone's aware of this name. So the name Dr. Sleep to a lot of people seemed boring or kind of not exciting. So I think that name didn't immediately draw to mind The Shining. Yeah. The advertising campaign tried to, but the name itself, I think, was, I don't know what you call it, and it's really only a small part because Dr. Sleep is what the people at the nursing home or whatever call him.
It's referenced very few times.
So it's not a big part of it, and I understand why you could call the book that, but the movie should have been called something like Return to Outlook. I don't know. Yeah. Not that. I'm just saying...
I think it's fine. It's just a title. Titles don't matter.
I think
it matters for marketing or whatever.
It's a movie that has worldwide made $77 million off of a pretty decent budget, so it's not going to be super profitable, if at all.
But I'm glad it exists.
No, I'm glad that it exists. And my point was, if they had released that movie a month earlier and marketed it differently, it could have made $200 million.
I know, but you're talking about finances. Let's talk about the film.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
The interesting thing about this movie, and I'm going to go back to Halloween 2018, because Halloween 2018 is a pretty strict sequel to only the original. Whereas this one, it's still
sequel to Shining to Kubrick and King.
Yeah, but it's more faithful because when I went into it, it's very much more faithful to the Kubrick version than it is the King book. But I think it's a kind of a weird dichotomy though because it came out 1980. So you had that come out in 1980. This comes out in 2019. So quite a bit, 39 years. So you have a sequel of 39 years later. So it's one of those things where it's like I don't really know who the audience is because
our teenagers biting at the bit for a sequel to The Shining.
From the audience members are adults, and if they get some teenagers in there, that's fine. But it's rated R.
I think
you
know
what I mean. Like,
I think what they should do here's like I don't want, you can finish, but I think what they should do if they really want this movie to have a longer life, so HBO is going to have HBO Max. Do an extended version of this, like the director's cut. Break it into a 4-part miniseries. Bada bing, bada boom. Millions of people will watch it.
George Costanza. So the thing, like, what I like about the movie is like the most terrifying elements to this.
It's a movie about sleeping.
It isn't sleeping. It's like again, the same. It kind of treads on the same ground as The Lighthouse, and its relationship issues. It's again, the descent into alcoholism and addiction. I'll say addiction more than anything because that's a big part of this film is addiction.
Yeah.
And then
I like how they address that and passing on of it and everything.
And then a lot of this other stuff they kind of is like almost, which I would like to see more, is like this kind of missing child mystery part.
With Lost Boys or a vampire group essentially.
I think that's kind of interesting because it's like
unexpected.
It's unexpected, and how far does the entrenchment of these people go? Who are they? Why do they exist? Those questions.
What is their influence?
But it's fine. It's good. It leaves the world open. I like that.
I like that, and that's why I think it works so well for me because I'm like, okay, you gave me it did everything right that chapter 2 of it does wrong, because I get to go into this world and I get to find more out about it, but I never know. I don't know who these people are, why they exist. You kind of know, but you don't. Yeah. There's more of them out there. How deep does it go? I think to me that's the real interesting part.
So, something else this does, it recreates some of the scenes and in some ways some of the performances or attempts to approximate them. They all have their own identity, the performers in this film. But, we see Wendy again, some flashbacks and stuff like that. And then, obviously we're in the, that's a spoiler a little bit.
It's not.
It is.
They showed it.
So anyway, it took me a little while we've talked about this, but it took me a while to settle in the film. But once I settled in, I really enjoyed it. But it did play that balance where it had so much going on.
It had introduced a lot of different threads.
It had a lot going on, and some of it was very much, genre heavy, which is fine. But it also took many things seriously, where it wasn't just lip service like, hey, we need a reason for him doing this. Oh, yeah, he's an alcoholic. No, they actually tried to say something about it. They try to, you know what I mean? I think that's why the film shines so much. No pun intended. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it made it my top 10 of the year. But yeah, man, it was I'm so happy it turned because it had a tall order too. Yeah, this had a lot going against it.
As a huge fan, Sean is one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, me too.
To have this, like again, 39 years later, being connected to that movie, it didn't fall short. I didn't come out of this
to be not just good, to be like, oh, some of this is really great. Like it's a huge achievement compared to The Shining.
And one of the best characters in this is an inanimate object, because it overlooks everything. No pun intended. And you
the feeling you get from it.
Yeah,
if you are,
it's just kind of like, I don't know. It did everything really well. It balanced nostalgia for something that it's weird because it didn't actually follow that movie. So there's still a nostalgia there for something it doesn't necessarily follow, but it did everything right. It straddled.
It did as well as it could have done. Could have ever hoped. So yeah, we like that film.
Let's see. So I'm trying to think of like other big. So Us was a movie. It's like, oh, that was this year.
Can't forget about it.
I had that on my top list. I just had so much fun watching it in theaters. I haven't rewatched it only because I do have a 2-year-old, and at nighttime I try to at least throw on something that's new because I have limited time. But if I wouldn't have had her, this is definitely one I would have thrown on again during the day.
With Us, I have seen a lot of people complaining. I think some people are mad, or some people, especially from the indie film community, or upset like, oh, Jordan Peele's getting all this praise heaped on him, and if I had made this movie, it'd been a lot more coherent and blah blah blah. So I think there's a lot of like that, like kind of sour grape stuff where people are really trashing us.
Yeah, but you also would have had none of the same person. You might have had your personality, but just the music, the use of music and everything. And
so I think with us, it's a movie where the visceral experience of watching it is one thing. But when you sit and think about that world and the logistics of it and how then it falls apart a little bit.
But that's so uninteresting. But that's the way to think about movies. That's how some people think about movies. But it's I think the messaging is more interesting, and the messaging of there was another film I just watched, and I can't think of what it was, but essentially, it is this is minor spoilers for us and kind of what it's about essentially, but it is about almost accepting or how far would you go to step on somebody else's back for you to succeed? You know what I mean? Or for you to, and that's the place people are driven to. Oh, yeah, I know what the other film I was thinking of. I'm not going to mention it because I don't want to give anything. But essentially, it's not an American language film, but it's the same sort of thing of like, hey, this person, you may be in a really bad position, but does it make it okay, for you to do harm unto others, just to give yourself self-worth, and can you live with that? You know what I mean? Like I think that's like the thing about the film that I find interesting more than the logistics of this stuff. And yeah, they do, and to their discredit, they do dive into logistics a little bit more than they should. Yep. They should have left it more vague because it does invite those criticisms, and I totally get that.
Giving enough description of something that you're like, wait a minute,
that it makes you start thinking about the logistics. I totally agree with that.
So I think that's where it kind of falls apart a little bit on repeat viewings for people, is that they gave you enough of the backstory of stuff to make it all kind of seem like, hey, this wouldn't really work. As opposed to if they had just taken it one step of like, if they had just obscured it one step further, then you don't think about all that stuff.
That is true. But
so,
again,
is this an entire world thing? Is this a location?
For me, that was a minor stumble, and everything else this film did right. I love the family. I'm so funny. Tim Heidecker, just
never thought I'd see him in like a big successful film.
I'm trying to. Why am I drawing a blank on her name? His
Elizabeth
wife,
Moss.
Yeah, Elizabeth Moss was like fantastic in it. The dad in it was hilarious. Like, I love so much about this film. I like to Get Out more, but I mean,
Get Out.
But I mean, I think for a second film, it's just
this movie did the opposite of The Lighthouse for me, because I went in, I liked it a lot. Then more I think about, it's like, it's an
dissolves
okay movie.
A little bit.
It's an okay movie. I think that people are like, it's Jordan Peele knocked it out of the park. Get Out's better.
So I think
the fact that this movie didn't suck was like one of those big deals, because a lot of times you have a guy come out, or whoever direct a movie in the first one, it's really good, and then the second one's like, eh. This one was still like a good, serviceable movie.
And it didn't feel like a retread. You didn't feel like, oh, he's a one-trick pony. Yeah. He only knows how to do this one thing. It's still horror, but it's like different enough.
But it's one of those movies, to me, it's like, it's kind of like The Giver, or I've seen these stories, and or like, what's the awful Ewan McGregor Scarlett Johansson movie where they're clones on an island, and they
the Island.
Yeah, The Island. It's kind of like that, but a horror version.
But like,
so it's
I would say is like Jordan Peele's had one of those things where he's had two movies that were incredibly financially successful, and then a lot of people are jumping to calling him like one of the greatest directors ever and all these things. And it's like, I think it's a bit early to start jumping on any of those subscriptions. Because people often do that, like M. Night Shyamalan was the next Spielberg. And I think part two is I think some of Peele's stuff can be a little bit compared to Shyamalan, because you have these kind of twists where the logic falls apart upon further reflection. Now, Get Out was a very solid movie where it really doesn't do that. I think Us is a little bit more comparable to a Shyamalan, like Signs or something, where when you think about the logic, you're like, wait a minute, what? But, still an enjoyable movie that I liked. I haven't really watched it yet, but I don't think it's like one of the greatest horror films of all time. I think it's just a good contemporary horror film that wasn't following the standard tropes of like slasher stuff.
It's probably around, like, again, I loved it, but it's probably around the 10 mark, my top 10 of the year. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't even, but this year was phenomenal, I thought.
So trying to think of these other, without spending too much time on some of these. So Child's Play, the reboot, it was fine.
Did you watch that?
I ended up watching it. Sorry.
Mark Hamill totally fine. He did good voice work. It was fine, but it wasn't like something that it didn't really resonate with audiences based on its box office performance.
It played a little too safe for me also at some point. You know what I mean?
Well, it was another one of those things where you talk about like when you have worked in retail or understand how stores of the world works, it doesn't work like that movie portrays it, so it kind of falls apart a little bit in that aspect. And everything, like whenever
I love the aspect of, again, we're on the minor spoilers for some of this stuff that we don't think matters that much, but I love the aspect of, even though they changed it to AI or whatever, of violence being a learned behavior, because he's watching them enjoy.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
The kids are laughing at Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and he's like, "Oh, this is fun." It's that learned behavior of horror, of violence, and there's some commentary there. But again, they do that one thing, and you know what I mean. They don't do much with it. They don't really think about the idea, and that's it.
So there was Child's Play. Like I said, there was the Pet Sematary remake that none of us are very hot on. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which was serviceable and fine, but not anything. It had some really good practical creature effects work and stuff.
Yes, that stuff. That was
that was really well done and very interesting. It's just
that made a lot of money, right? Or did
they're making. I think they're gonna make a sequel. I mean, it was successful enough. It
only made enough money if they get the people from the first one to come back. If they recast the same characters, it wasn't that good.
Then if they do a time
Jack
jump,
Black's like, I'm not returning.
Well, I was saying if they don't do a time jump and it's a pretty much a direct sequel and they recast a bunch of people.
It just felt like it trotted a lot of the same ground that unfortunately the Goosebumps movie had trotted recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think apparently the pitch for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark happened years ago before Goosebumps got made, but it basically seems like the only way they figured out to break these child story series into movies is to have the books and the stories be fictitious in a world with characters who find it, and then it comes real.
I'm sure, even though it was pitched prior, I'm sure it probably got financing after they saw what Goosebumps did. And they thought, hey, we'll do this PG-13.
They
was also a kid
they got
series.
Del Toro on board to produce.
Now we'll just wait for Fear Street. What else is some of the other ones?
Do a reboot of Eerie, Indiana. Let's see.
Well, they did the Are You Afraid of the Dark, which is apparently pretty good. I haven't watched that, though.
So The Dead Don't Die, which I got to watch recently. And that's one where I get that it was marketed somewhat as like Zombieland with Bill Murray. Like in some of the trailers, it's like, oh, this kitschy comedy
Jim Jarmusch film.
It's got, but to the average person, that's, I don't know what that is. They just,
I'm just
it's Bill Murray and it's Kylo Ren and it's the sorcerer or whatever from Doctor Strange killing zombies.
What's her name? Selena Gomez.
Yeah. So they see all this stuff, and then what it is kind of like a stoner hangout movie with zombies in it.
Tom Waits.
With like very dry humor. So I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it a lot.
But it definitely, I could see how someone went into it expecting it to be something 100% different than it was based on the advertisements, which is why I think it had like the largest premiere ever of Jim Jarmusch's career, and then pretty negative critical reaction and a drop because it's not a wide stream, appeal movie. It's more of his audience seeks this out, and he's just friends with people that want to be in it.
Yeah,
and it has
or
some
they
really
appreciate his
jokes.
work. They appreciate his work.
I think overall, like, it's one of my favorites of the year. I really enjoyed watching it. There's a lot of moments I liked in it, and it's so dry, and it's very nice to get a zombie movie where everything around you is a 10 and your reaction's like a 0.
Yeah, Bill Murray just unimpressed. It's hard to have a bad time when it's Bill Murray and Adam Driver. You know what I mean? Sitting in the car.
Driver was really good.
And then, like, even the car they give Adam Driver is so ridiculous and stupid.
Funny,
and some of the sound effects they put in there to reference other films he's been in.
Yeah.
When he drives the car in.
Doesn't he have a Star Wars keychain or something? Yeah.
And she's like, that's a good film. So there's all this kind of just
it's like Adam Driver being like, yeah, I did Star Wars so I could do this film. It's like doing these films.
And then the end of it kind of ties into like one of the prank endings for Silent Hill. And I'm sure you can think, if you think about it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Which is just funny. So it's this kind of really goofy movie. So you have to know going in, it's a slow hangout movie with very dry humor. The zombies are kind of a secondary element. And
I think towards the end it started losing steam for me a little bit.
Yeah.
It didn't feel as fresh towards the end. I was like, okay, I'm waiting for a little bit of a change, or
it's the stakes to shift
again,
or something.
or at least just their situation. As far as I don't care about the plot really, but their dialogue did not. I remember a lot more of the interactions in the first half versus the last half. You know what I mean? The interesting interaction between the characters. You also had Danny Glover in there, which was great. But And then Steve Buscemi as the racist.
Yeah. That was good.
Yeah, I mean, again, setting up and all those character stuff, and then it kind of slows down for me a little bit. I still liked it quite a bit, but it did not make my top films of the year, but there's so many great films out. So, but yeah, I did like that.
Let's see, what other movies do we have? So there's some stuff like Velvet. So there's some Netflix stuff like The Perfection and Velvet Buzzsaw, and the incredibly, shockingly vile, evil Ted Bundy movie. So The Perfection, like that's the thing. We did episodes on these. That one was just so kind of out there. It's like, man, I didn't really expect this to go there.
Piercing. I was thinking Piercing and The Perfection would be a good double bill, but The Perfection is definitely
more palatable.
What did I say first? Did I say, sorry, The Perfection is more, as people were referring to it, schlocky maybe. It's more broad, I think. Yeah. The Perfection is more broad and just, okay, hit you over the head with, this is what's going to happen next, and takes way more turns and is a bit hammier than that. But in the fact that it's this like weird, perverse, unexpected thing, that's where they share similarities, I think.
Yeah, so Velvet Buzzsaw was just kind of crazy. Didn't really leave any impact on me. It had some fun elements, but it definitely wasn't the follow-up movies I was expecting from the director of Nightcrawler.
Yeah, honestly, thinking about it, it almost feels like the dead don't die a little bit. You got these characters you love, or actors you love playing these wild characters.
John Malkovich is funny.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal. It's Toni Collette. Like everybody in there, I think is just awesome in that film. The plot, the plot is whatever, but it does have some really funny commentary about the art world and stuff like that I liked. But yeah, at the end of the day, it wasn't 10 out of 10. But again, it was more interesting than your middle of the road film, I think.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need those middle of the road films because you need something to relax and just like decompress. There's value in many different forms of cinema, but I'm saying even though it's a little rough around the edges, I did really appreciate this film.
So I think what we'll do is, we'll do this in two steps. We've discussed all the kind of big horror films. So I think we can kind of narrow down like what our horror movie of the year is, and then discuss all the other things that could be our movie of the year that aren't necessarily horror.
Okay.
So in terms of,
let me jump in on two other horror films. Or did you already cover all the horror films?
I mean, was there ones we didn't?
There was two films I was going to touch on that you didn't mention.
Which ones?
It's part of the top 10 though.
Okay.
One Cut of the Dead.
Oh yeah, sorry, I had that in the notes. I didn't go back to it. Okay. Yeah, One Cut of the Dead.
Did you get a chance to watch that, Derek?
No, I never did.
Okay, no, that's
loser.
Yeah. So I just saw 1917 also, which is like the one cut horror film. That didn't make my top 10, I don't think. I really appreciate it. It didn't work on me like it does everybody else exactly. And as somebody, I mean, my job is video production. You know what I mean? Yeah. I understand. I have a massive appreciation for that stuff. We work on short films and do stuff. So I vastly appreciate, and there's some things I don't know how they did. And I'm trying to, and I watch a lot of the behind the scenes that they've shown, but there's like even some moments I'm like, obviously they pulled it off. They did it in the movie.
Magician
high cuts.
Tricks.
Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible.
Illusions.
But it didn't work on me all the way. It didn't, it's just, there wasn't enough to dig in there on story wise. And I don't mean plot. I'm just saying like the journey was great, but it was pretty straightforward, and you got to see a perspective, but you weren't introspective about anything you saw. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you're talking about the dinner scene at Midsummer when you're thinking like, oh, this, like nothing pulled me in that way. And granted, not all war films will exactly, but at least you think about war or whatever. But sorry, to get back to One Cut of the Dead, that's not exactly one shot, but a quote unquote billed as a one shot movie that I put above 1917. I'm sorry, the budget is smaller. The photography, the photography's not as good, but what it does with that runtime,
I think like. So it's unfortunate you get a chance to watch it.
It's on Shudder. Yes, we're not going to do any spoilers, I don't think.
But I think it's a movie that, even if we don't give it like our best, but it's definitely one to watch. Like in terms of expectations to performance, it is one that, if you're into filmmaking, the process of filmmaking at all, if you've ever worked, especially if you've worked on a project on indie, short film, indie film, whatever.
And I wonder if me watching One Cut of the Dead ruined my experience in 1917 because I was out of my head so much when I was watching the film. I was thinking about everything going on.
Well, it's one of those things where, to some extent, when people make something all about being a oneer or a one take or whatever, to me, sometimes it draws so much attention to the filmmaking craft, you're not paying attention to being immersed in the story.
And I was talking to Arnie because I saw Arnie and his girlfriend Sarah, and they really loved it. And I said, I think part of it was my fault because I was outside of the film. And I really try to forget that sometimes.
I think it's because to him, if it's based on a real event that's sad, then it holds more weight than anything fictional.
Yeah, there was a slack argument. But you know, maybe if I watch it like 10 times and all of a sudden I quit thinking about anything and I'm just watching the film, and maybe it'll really work on me, like, because I know how those one-shot scenes can work on people. You know, I talked about the one, I just ordered Long Day's Journey into Night, which is supposedly has an amazing one-shot film, but his Khalil Blues, it has amazing long shot that really has an effect unlike anything else. But again, yeah, it depends on how it works on you. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But One Cut of the Dead just does something so much differently and unexpected. And again, you almost turn it off after the first, in the first half hour. You've got to get past that. You've got to just keep watching and trusting. It uses it to a different effect. But yeah, that film, definitely, it was in my top.
All the stuff,
close to, top movies.
All the stuff that frustrates you as you're watching it in the first 30 to 40 minutes will turn around on the experience.
That's a good way to,
so stick with it. Yes, what was the other one?
And another has very long shots in it. Actually, I finished Climax last night.
Okay.
Gaspar Noé film. It's like some dancers, I guess, in a French dance troupe.
So kind of like Suspiria, Derek.
Yeah, a little bit. They have I think this is a synopsis. They have a bad trip and things get very bad in there. But it is, I don't know if you got watching the Gaspar Noé films. Only other one I saw of his was Enter the Void, which I liked. It falls in the category of, I didn't love it.
Enter the Noid?
Enter the Void.
I like to see that.
Enter the Noid. Yeah, that's the new Marvel.
Enter the Noid. It's the guy.
We're doing a sequel to Haunted Ween with the Noid as the killer.
Yeah. So Climax. Yeah, Gaspar Noé. He is somebody, and I thought about this, and I don't want it to come out the wrong way. He is like a French Eli Roth, and I don't dislike Eli Roth as a person. I don't like many of his films, and I'm saying that as he's a lover of film history and films, but he's also a provocateur. And there's a difference between some French provocateurs versus like some American ones that want to do something that is
there's a lot more croissants.
That is just like Green Inferno. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I love that
there's
film.
So many croissants.
Let me provoke people by making the Green Inferno.
So it's one of the things where I have a lot of film history love. So I'm going to take a lot of my love of a specific subgenre and make a very schlocky modern entry in that.
Yeah.
That will provoke a reaction because it goes so far on.
Yeah, but I think Gaspar Noé pulls it off. I actually loved Climax. I finished it last night, and I was thinking, I didn't see this. I had to make sure it came out this year.
Yeah.
Because it was listed as the year prior, but in America it came out April 1st. And I'm like, I didn't see this on anybody's best of the year list. And I'm like, am I wrong in liking this so much?
I think a lot of times people do the festival circuit and put stuff in where they saw it.
Well, I Googled, I was like, yeah, this is like, I really enjoyed it. You know who put out as their number one was John Waters.
Oh.
And I was like, that makes sense. It gets pretty wild, but if you haven't seen it yet, you may be sleeping on it, and that's fine.
So what's more French, baguettes or croissants? So it'd be okay. We use baguettes instead.
So anyway, they start a one-er towards the end, and again, it's not billed as that. You know what I mean? It's not drawing attention to itself, but it effectively works, and it is so incredible just because there's so much going on, and it feels very theatrical, like Birdman. Where it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on, but it pulls you into the story. And it's just, I think, Climax I really loved, actually. And it's on Amazon Prime to watch. Maybe a A24 film, I think.
Since we're just talking about horror of the year, two things I want to bring that are not in they're video games, but I do think they are something I want to mention because the impact they have on me is Resident Evil 2, which is really just straightforward, stereotypical survival horror. There's not much to get in depth on that. It just, the visuals, the lack of supplies in the game adds a lot of tension. And you know, if something you haven't checked out, I highly recommend it. You can also
Most people have. It was a very well-selling game.
And if you haven't, they've released the demo to play it all the time. So if it's something you don't know about as far as game mechanics, check it out. The other one, which we've talked on and off about, is Death Stranding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one, I believe, that's finished the game. And it's horror in the same sense that, like, I'm not comparing them at all. I'm just saying, like, it's not conventional horror. It's like The Lighthouse, or it's like Midsommar, or you know, whatever.
It's the game that Kojima made after having dabbled with Silent Hill for Silent Hills. They made the PT, the trailer.
But to be fair, he has always dabbled in some of that. You know what I mean? Even
well, the Metal Gear had horror.
The horror in this game, I kind of compare more to like Lighthouse, where you're isolated, the fear of being alone in uncharted territory without anything, you know, because that's the horror.
But there's also beauty in it too.
Yeah,
it's this dichotomy of like the beauty and the awesome music that kicks in, but also like isolation.
And the sense of never really feeling safe for a majority of the game, you know, because I've had the privilege of playing all of it. I don't want to say privilege, but I've had the opportunity to play through all of it. So it's one of those things too where I would again compare it to a lot of the A24 stuff. Like, it's not for everybody. This game is a chore. Through some of it, there is a point where you kind of get through, and it's a little bit of, you know, a slog, because there is parts where because Hideo Kojima has always had great cut scenes and dialogue, and there is kind of a barren part in one part where there's not a lot of that going on, and then but when it hits at the very end, it's very heavy, and it's a very fulfilling experience as far as what you get at the end, which is typical for a lot of people.
And two, the chore part for me, like I'm 20 out. I haven't played it in a while, but I'm like 20 hours in. And I didn't stop because it was like, oh, this is a chore. I was, you know, delivering packages, walking across, but it was still fun and engaging. You know, I just got really busy and I was trying to watch more films.
But it's not a game that you can hop into and play for 20. Like Resident Evil, if you're playing that, you can get in Resident Evil, play for 20 minutes and accomplish something.
You need about an hour or so.
You're not accomplishing anything in 20 minutes. You might just get, you know, halfway to the location you're going to in 20 minutes.
Yeah. But it's forgiving. You can save and stop there and come right back. You don't feel like you've got to.
But I just want to mention those two things because
they're highlights, They're
highlights, and, you know, horror can be more than just film or TV. You can also have it in that. And I don't read many books or, you know, like magazines, so I can't get any of that media, you know. I mean, there's also podcasts, and there's so much stuff to get out there, but I just wanted to bring those two up because they had big impacts on me. And I mean, I have a Resident Evil shirt on. We covered the entire film franchise this year.
So, I
forgot about that.
So, giving our top horror movie of the year, trying to like just kind of narrow down like what the choices are to begin with.
Are we going to talk about general films real quick?
We can do that after.
Let's before we give a consensus. What is William? Like, what is your? If you're going to sit down and tell somebody, then we can kind of maybe come together and pick what we would all recommend. But if you're going to sit down and you're watching one horror movie of all the ones we watch this year, what are you going with?
So out of like I would say like the contenders, just to kind of the baseline.
No, I'm just asking you personally.
Well, I'm just saying.
Okay,
I'm explaining. Okay. So like out of the contenders, where I would say like the best horror film of the year, you have like Doctor Sleep, Midsommar, The Lighthouse. Out of the ones I've seen, there's some I haven't seen, and then like I would say One Cut of the Dead. But in terms of like what my favorite was probably Doctor Sleep. I enjoyed that one from beginning to end. I love the visuals of it. I like the, you know, all the actors in it. I like the character, I like the story they told. I like how it all worked. It's one that I think is a little bit more of an easy to watch movie. Like I think I could recommend to our parents to watch it and they can enjoy it, as opposed to Lighthouse and Midsommar and all those movies. They kind of require a calibration for what to expect. So a lot of times movies from A24 get a lot of critical buzz or acclaim or festival buzz. And then they get all these quotes, and then people who are general audience members go out and are very turned off because it's what they deliver. Now, us knowing what it is going in, that's different.
It's a kind of a bummer too because there is that sometimes divide, and there's always going to be a divide.
Well, The Witch gets like a poster quote from Stephen King, and then it pisses people off.
But I'm saying it's a bummer because there is a divide, and you don't, people you can tell people watch films all day, and they won't watch it, and that's fine because everybody just only has their time, and they're going to watch it. But it is one of those things where it's like, when something is picked because it's safe, then it doesn't help anybody expand their horizons. You know what I mean? When you're just like, oh, just watch that one, because that one, you won't have a bad time. But then again, you play it safe. Why the Marvel films are so successful is they play it safe every time. And, you have an enjoyable experience every time for the most part. But, but also too, you're going down that line and you're not, and then suddenly you do get something like, Midsummer or Lighthouse, and you're like, don't know how to react. But, thankfully there's more of these films being funded on a bigger level, I think. There's always, independent weird films, but I think there's more of an appetite for them, enough to finance them, it seems like, in a distribution method. And the A24's figured out how to make this stuff work very well for them, I think. But hopefully because of that, they'll start getting out in the mainstream a little bit more. You know what I mean? But I totally agree that Dr. Sleep is the easiest digestible of those two.
Well, too, and not just beyond that.
But I think it goes Dr. Sleep. Midsummer is easier, and then Lighthouse is the hardest to swallow, probably. But it could also be really enjoyable for anybody. You know what I mean? You don't know how people are going to react to it.
I was just thinking, like, in the general, like, when you look at the reviews, like, now, and I'm not saying that my favorite is Dr. Sleep because of that. I just enjoy the movie from start to finish. Those other, like, I had a much more enjoyable experience watching that from beginning to end and came away more fulfilled. The other ones are a little bit more of like you had to sit on it and think a little bit. And that can, like, I need to rewatch those movies. Like, I need to rewatch Lighthouse and Midsummer, because I only saw Lighthouse recently, but I saw Midsummer back when it came out. I would like to see that again.
Yeah, I watched it again with Nicole, and I was like, yeah, I still feel the same about this. Like, and I was almost like those moments you're waiting for and stuff, I was like getting a different reaction. And I know you probably haven't yet, but there's so many details hidden in the set design and background, and even some of the trees. There's stuff hidden in the trees.
There's like a character whose face is like...
Yes, that ties into the story. Like, there's like so many layers to it,
Well, you see, for me, this is a weird situation I'm in, because I just watched that this morning. Yeah. And I really would love to pick that as my favorite of the year, because I just think there's moments that, like, I think most people have been in like a bad relationship. And I think what makes it
don't go to that movie or don't watch that movie with your significant other if you're having a lot of difficulties.
Yeah, I think this to me is like, it's kind of
or you say that though, but Marriage Story, my wife and I, we have a 2-year-old. Everybody has their ups and downs. You know what I mean? We were hitting a little rough spot. We were watching. We're great right now, but we're watching Marriage. She's like, "Want to watch Marriage Story?" I'm like, "Sure, let's watch it." And I was a little worried about that. You know what I mean? That's about a divorce. But honestly, it's almost like after we watched that, I didn't talk about it in depth to her, but came out better, because I'm like, oh shit. Like, first of all, their situations, they're not monsters to each other. It's just like, they aren't terrible people. Yeah. They don't do good things all the time. Both people make mistakes in that film, and I think you're supposed to walk away saying like, hey, both sides, nobody's perfect in that. Yeah. But also, it's like, oh, wait, we've got it better off than them. It's like somewhere in here. You know what I mean? So you maybe will watch Midsummer and be like, oh, actually, we're stronger than those people, because these people are pretty weak. If you walk into it and you're not having a good time with your relationship with your partner and you identify too much with this, then maybe it is time to break it off.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I'm sure I've seen people say they went with their significant other, and then one of them comes out saying, like, actually, she was in the right. I'm glad she did that. Yeah. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. But see, that's how I felt like.
Or he or they.
Yeah. But I felt like the end decision.
I like the end, but it's also it's also not, watching it, you can think like, oh, this is
like the good version.
It's a fair, I don't want to.
No spoilers.
Okay, look, we'll get into the light spoilers for 60 seconds. I think it is almost like it's a fairy tale type movie. And even though it is, you see it and you're like, oh, this is, if you're on her side, you're like, this is a happy ending. But really, it is almost a dark ending, because you think she's found peace. But, but you think like, oh, wait, what is she in? She has found this quote unquote peace because of this mental situation she was in that led her to that, which is a darker place. You know what I mean? It has this weird ending that's like, love it.
It's the good version of Tusk, sort of, because it has a very Tusk-esque ending, and one scene, and Wicker Man. So you take Nicolas Cage's Wicker Man, not the original, but you have those two. And it's like, if you want to see the good version of those two movies kind of combined, this is that mixed with a little bit of Stockholm Syndrome, and it works really well.
And it plays with the genre, in knowing it's a folk horror like Wicker Man, it sets those expectations, so it continues to build dread throughout. So even though some things may not be happening, you've got the humor throughout. You know what I mean? The comedic relief. You're also thinking about this relationship that is not in a good place, and you're wondering where it's going. But on top of that, you also layer in the folk horror, where you're like, okay, I know this is a folk horror film, these white people in these white dresses are creeping me out, and like there's just so many things going on at times.
Get there
Yes, I love the way this film builds and it crescendos, and I think it is.
And it does.
The music, the cinematography, everything.
And it's all, to me, minor relationship failures that snowball perpetually into what happened. And it's one of those things, if anybody had ever made a decision at any point to do what was maybe best for everybody, then this doesn't happen. But you can see how in the real world that something horrifically tragic happens, you might not be able to do that. And, because instead of, and I think that's what works so well for me. And then again, I go back to like The Lighthouse, and it's the same thing where it's like, oh, okay, at any point in time, this maybe could have ended, but then you just see like, it snowballs, and I think that's where I like that kind of stuff.
So what's your top horror movie? My top
it's because I'm so closely, I want to go with Midsommar. That's what I want to go with. That's what I'm going with, because I watch it and it's something I think I can think about a lot. And my close second would be Dr. Sleep. And I love The Lighthouse, but it's just so out there. It's hard for me to put it. I love it, but it's one of those movies like I really need to watch it again. But I'm going Midsommar because I really like it. It gave me a lot to think about, and it's something that like there's just cringy moments in it that aren't like, there are some really horrific moments in the movie. But to me, the most horrible moments in the movie that I guess reflect is like the dinner table scene where they're all outside eating, and it's just it's like, it's so awful to watch, but then the other person just doesn't care, and it's and just see how one's own self-interest.
That's why I told you, I said, granted, it's a long movie and all that, but that's why I was like, you should watch that with Courtney, just because, it's a female lead, it's her relation, you know what I mean? I think there's something that people can get enjoyment out of it. I watched it with Nicole, she's like, oh yeah, I liked it. She didn't love it, but she liked it quite a bit. But
it's something easier to, as much as I loved Mandy from a couple years ago, this is much easier to digest something like that.
It's universal. It's about relationships. It's so universal.
Whereas like to me, Lighthouse, I put more on the Mandy spectrum because they're not similar at all, but man, they're so wacky and out there, and just the visuals, not everybody can get in.
You have to be on the wavelength to kind of get with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty much like, honestly, that's how my list is for horror. I have Midsommar. I have a general order: Midsommar, Dr. Sleep, and then Lighthouse, and then I have like, Us, One Cut of the Dead, and Climax, somewhere around there.
I'll go get my top five real quick. I mean, it's Midsommar, it's Dr. Sleep, then it's Lighthouse, The Dead Don't Die, and then I really like Little Monsters. And that was a movie that none of us really got to talk. I think maybe the only one I watched
Hulu,
it.
Right?
Yes, it's not. Again, it's a movie that I think it's the horror is in the emotional aspect of it, and not necessarily the visual aspect of it, because it is a comedic zombie movie, but it's a very emotional movie, and I think sometimes that can affect you more because it just does everything right to get you emotionally. Mm-hmm. And I like that because a lot of movies can't do that, especially with characters you don't have much knowledge of, and you're only doing this one kind of journey with them. To get really no prior, it's kind of like Shaun of the Dead. Like you have no prior like relationships with these characters, but in that little world, you like them a lot.
Okay, yeah.
And that's how I kind of feel with Little Monsters. Like I'm familiar with some of the actors in this, not enough to be like, oh, I like them just because of who they are. But what they give in the movie is like, oh, okay, I like so much what they've done with these characters and who they made them be that you can kind of connect with them. And then you care about what happens. And I think a lot of horror movies have that problem that you never care.
Yeah, yeah.
So it sounds like I was Dr. Sleep Midsommar, you were Midsommar Dr. Sleep, and you were Midsommar Dr. Sleep. So I guess we can, since it's 2 out of 3, we can get it.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I'm fine with that being like, as just based on the consensus, like that, like, so we would say our horror movie of the year was Midsommar. And I agree. Like
I feel better that, because we can have a debate, but you don't have Midsommar is it like your number 20 film?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it's
one
pretty.
That I saw it and I was like, oh, this is like a 6.5, 7 out of 10. But then since then, it's appreciated like a 9 because I'm like, the more I've thought about it and the themes and all the detail.
It's just like, one scene in the film for me was just like, oh, it was the first time I watched a scene in the film where I was like, oh, this is actually really gruesome. And there was somebody behind me. And I realized I caught myself in the theater like this, watching it. it's, you know, kind of when things start getting kicked off, really. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but the guy behind me, I heard him go, "What the fuck? What the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fuck? What the fuck?" And it was like the reaction the characters are having in the movie. You know what I mean? And like that takes a lot of power, and it is the build up. You know what I mean? They knew to build it up to that, and I don't know. I really love that film.
But again, I think what makes that scene, I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about, is the lack of reaction from certain people in the movie.
Yes, it's so horrifying.
Yeah.
And
then there's just some people that you can get why the main character may be numb to it because of everything they've experienced. You know,
Yeah.
probably some PTSD with all this stuff. But then the other two characters are just kind of like,
So
you know, and you would think you've seen something like that in real life, like that would just be the most shocking. Yeah.
So we would say that, so our movie of the year, consensus movie of the year would be Midsummer with Dr. Sleep, a close number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, there's a number of other movies we talked about, but one that we definitely say is the under the radar need to check out is One Cut of the Dead. One that I know a lot of horror people talked about, like on the websites and podcasts and stuff, but I definitely think it's something that's worth checking out on Shudder. Because even if you only want to get a trial, if you haven't gotten one before, you can get like a week trial or whatever, watch that and Creepshow or other
somebody
stuff.
said, I can't remember what distributor, but some distributor is starting to put out, I think, or they have also put out some Shudder exclusives on disc, but they've been DVD, apparently. So Derek didn't get around to watching it, but I imported a, I think it was that Japanese copy of One Cut of the Dead. Anyway, I imported a copy of One Cut of the Dead, and it plays on our player.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you can import a Blu-ray. But again, you're going to spend $30. I wanted to have a copy of that because I love that film so much.
Who knows if they'll have a U.S.
Yeah,
release
they probably will eventually, but I just wanted to have a copy. I loved it. I was like, I want a copy of this film. But, you know, it's $35. I understand if you are against streaming, but...
Or somebody who's a physical copy.
Yeah, you can spend $5 if you want to take a chance on it, watch it on Shudder, and then decide. But
yeah, so then like the last section, we'll just say we'll open it up beyond just horror in terms of like, so other movies that came out. So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Uncut Gems, 1917, Little Women,
Knives Out,
The Irishman, Knives Out, Parasite, Joker. Because I just watched Joker last night. The basic thing I'll say is, so something I remember, so the Christopher Nolan movie Interstellar. When that came out, there were a lot of people talking about how deep and rich it was and how it broke their mind. And how it was like the only sci-fi film that had ever done something. I'm like, have you ever seen 2001? And the answer across the board from people with that reaction was no.
Or Tarkovsky films or
whatever, you know, Solaris or whatever. So then I feel that people that came away from Joker saying this is a profound, moving experience, it changed, blah, 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 had not seen Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, like 80s, 70s Scorsese.
Girl Interrupted.
So it feels like, and it's not to put anybody down, it's just saying a lot of times if your frame of reference is such that you haven't seen kind of the movie about the loner. So your protagonist in the movie is an antagonist in any other film.
And also, if you're going to like something, if it has the Joker in it, you know what I mean? That also helps.
Well,
like I would say,
I guess I have not seen the Joker.
I haven't either.
Well, my comparison to this could be me looking at myself as one of my favorite movies. Like I love Logan. But I love Logan because I have appreciation for the Westerns and a lot of the movies. Now, I've seen them that they kind of reference and pull from and make. So I like that movie because of what it did and what it tried to do, right? But I think a lot of people maybe like the Joker, but have not, like you said, have failed to have seen
I'm not being a gatekeeper either.
No, you don't have to be a gatekeeper, but you can just say, like, as me being a person who loves Logan, I can see somebody loving Logan and just be like, oh yeah, like
so I can't like
for shallow reasons.
So yes, and once again, I'm not gatekeeping or shaming anyone for liking things for any reason. Because even earlier, I talked about how just referencing that you know about movies from the 30s or 40s doesn't make you inherently more correct on a subject.
Probably who like
everything's subjective anyway.
No, I don't think. I think there's probably not a ton of crossover between that because I think what happened with Joker is had there not been the media firestorm there was around it, then I think it would have been if there hadn't been all the uproar and the military sending out memos about incels or something, I think that it would have still done well and made $400 million or something and been fine. But then the media's surrounding it, the narrative caused it to be this international story, and then it grossed $1 billion worldwide. I think it was, the performances are great. Joaquin Phoenix was really good. De Niro was good. Like in smaller roles, like Zazie Beetz, who's in it from she was in Domino and Deadpool 2 and on Atlanta and stuff. She was good in it. Mark Maron's like a pretty small role. So everybody in it does really good work. It looks great. Like the color palette is very pleasing. It's a well shot film. It looks good. And it's just kind of like a story where it follows your descent into being like a violent person. So it's all fine. I just think that everybody was saying like, oh, it's going to give the incels inspiration. I think there is a small subset of people that will walk away thinking of him as a huge hero because like, I think it's in the trailers. He gets beat up on by like broy Wall Street dudes and the rich people don't want to help him. And there's all these things that kind of tie into some narratives that exist on seedy corners of the internet. Now you can't constrict your art because somebody else may take something in a certain way. That you can't operate on that level of fear. I'm just saying like there is probably a small subset of people that come away thinking that he's someone to emulate and to see as a hero. Well, it's like the people who like idolize Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver and stuff. It's like, you can come away from whatever, as long as somebody acts on it. It's just, you could definitely see that movie, people taking a parallel from the Joker character and saying, oh, he's kind of like the mass shooters. And it's like, yeah, kind of. But I don't think that's a reason to say you should ban the movie, you can't release it. That's nonsense. It's just being aware of who might take that as a rallying cry and use that to say, this is a validation of my worldview, when I don't think the movie was doing that. And there was some stuff about like class warfare that wasn't that super thorough in the movie.
Is it humorous, being from Todd Phillips? And I think Walking Phoenix can be very funny, even when it's not a straight comedic role, something even like The Master. Like
it's not humorous.
It's humorless.
Pretty much.
That's disappointing,
which is typically not how the Joker operates in most.
I'm sure there were a few scenes in theaters where I'm sure people laughed, but it wasn't. But like to me, it wasn't like a Danny McBride super dark comedy, which I could have seen working a lot like to my. That's
what I wondered. Yeah,
if it was that kind of like super pitch black humor cable guy type stuff.
Yeah,
that's one thing. But this is kind of like a straightforward Scorsese light type narrative. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just didn't do any, like to me it wouldn't be in my top 5.
Scorsese was almost gonna help produce it, and then there's a director's roundtable at Hollywood Reporter put together. They do them every year. I love watching those. I think I posted something about them. Yeah, because Lulu Wang was talking about not turning out a Marvel film. But anyway, Scorsese's at the table also, and then Todd Phillips is also there. Yeah, and he talked about why he didn't like the comment. Yeah, I can't think of his name, but he always hosts them. He asked, he's like, so why did you decide not to produce that? And he talks about why he didn't want to do it and all this stuff and. And then he talks about superhero films, of course, because they do it. And Todd Phillips is like, we didn't make a superhero film.
It's like, I'm so tired of the narrative. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Well, like, just to get into, like, my 2 favorite movies here, because I watched so many, but outside of horror, my favorite movie of the year by far was...
I'm just waiting for you to say it.
Oh, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I rewatched it with my wife 2 weeks ago. She didn't get to watch it with me. I went to watch it by myself. And it's still just great. Everything about the movie works really well. It's something that I can see myself revisiting a lot and watching. And it's just kind of a fun movie that, I don't know. It's
like a hangout movie.
It's a hangout movie. And, his last one, The Hateful Eight, was just, in my opinion, one of the worst movies I've ever watched in my entire life.
Well, I think that's okay.
No, it was very bad.
You could say it's one of the least enjoyable.
It was one of the least enjoyable movies I've ever watched in my entire life.
Because if you haven't watched some of the independent films we have, then you can't say worst.
As far as a director of his caliber with the actors of their caliber he had in the movie, it was pretty awful in my opinion.
Well,
now, to come off of that, to see this, and given what the material was about, I think it was handled very well, and it could have been awful, but it wasn't. I really
you were skeptical. You were really skeptical.
Yeah, I was very skeptical about it. Yeah, and before I even watched the movie, I went and read the Wikipedia page about
which was wrong, and then surprised.
Which was wrong. But what I read from there was enough for me, like, oh, okay, I'll watch it. Because I did not want to see a movie where I had to watch Sharon Tate murdered.
Yeah, and I never expected him to go down that road.
But I didn't want to watch that, so I wanted to make sure.
Like the Sharon Tate something.
Yeah, the one ghost movie. Yeah, I didn't want to watch that.
The Haunting of Sharon Tate. Yeah. A lot of people put that on their top list of the year, but I did not.
I didn't want that. So I went and I usually don't do that anyway. Then my other one is I love the Star Wars movie. I know it has its problems. But to me, there's just something that Star Wars has that no other movie can get, and maybe it's because I have nostalgia for Star Wars, and Star Wars has been a part of my film life.
That they have a copyright on lightsabers.
Yeah, but I'm just from the time that I can remember when I was young to now,
That's
like
great.
Star Wars has always had a big impact, and something that like me and my wife, I've watched all of them with her now, and even though maybe it wasn't the best one they had, I still don't think at the day that was an awful movie because I've watched a lot of bad movies. And I think,
honestly, before you said Star Wars, when you said for the caliber of who's involved in everything, talking about Hateful Eight being, I was thinking that's how I felt about Rise of the Skywalker.
Yeah.
I just can't believe it.
I can get it. But I still just enjoy it.
Yeah, but that's great. Yeah.
Hateful Eight is on Netflix now as a multi-part series. I need to rewatch that version, because I wasn't huge on it either. I just thought it was. I really think movies should have intermissions if they're longer than 2.5 hours.
The way I feel about the Hateful Eight is the way I kind of feel about A24, as I feel like it's very self-congratulatory about it. And I feel like this is a movie where like everybody that had something to do with it was like in the room doing a reach around for each other. It was just a big room of that, and it's like, no, that's not me. I feel like that's like it felt bougie, and one time in Hollywood, like going back and forth, like I would probably put that as my top movie of the year so far at this point too. Granted, I haven't seen Knives Out, and I haven't seen 1917, I haven't seen Uncut Gems because it's been so busy, or Little Women. But as of the movies I saw in terms of like my overall enjoyment, like it's probably Dr. Sleep and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like right up there. I love the aesthetic of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
The look, the vibe.
I'm being quiet on it, but I also love that film.
Yeah. But like if I could have every movie that looked like that,
Well, you don't want every, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, the production design.
The one quibble, I mean, there's a lot of things, but like the one thing that I have a problem with, and I had a problem with when we reviewed it and talked about, was this depiction of Bruce Lee.
See, I have no problem
with that. And reading more of the interviews and stuff with Tarantino and Brad Pitt and other people, I've kind of been like, okay, well, this movie wasn't saying this was gospel. It was Tarantino saying,
it's
like,
a fairy tale.
He was saying like in this movie, if Superman's in it, Cliff would beat up Superman because it's the movie, they're all fictional, and I'm writing the characters this way. He's like, it's not saying that's the way the real person was.
But I kind of also took it as like, is he reliable? Well, because even when it happens, he's like laughing about it. So it's like, to me, it's like, I do think he held his own and did good, but I don't know if that's what really happened.
But the Brad Pitt talked about the way the scene was originally supposed to play and how he suggested it should go instead. And it's like, that saved it. If they had done it the other way, then it would have made people really upset.
The way I feel about watching that scene is somebody who goes to see a stand-up comedian and then they talk badly about a property or individual they really love. And it's like sometimes even
this is a person, not a property.
It doesn't matter because there's still a lot of
it's a ribbing. Yeah, it's like it's a roast.
If you can't go and take something like that, then you are very thin-skinned.
So here's the
because it wasn't bad about.
But here's the
he wasn't punching down either. Bruce Lee is known as one of the biggest badasses to ever live.
Let's just like say the something where I could see someone making an argument. This isn't like the argument; it's just an argument. Roman Polanski, we know what he's been accused of and what he did. And why he lives in France now, not the United States. He's portrayed mostly neutral or positive. And Bruce Lee is somebody that is, this cultural icon who gets a representation that is neutral and negative.
He was part of that story, and he did,
I'm just saying, somebody could say,
what are you supposed to say? I mean, he was hot shit. And
no, I'm just saying, somebody could come away from it saying this person who, had interactions with a 13-year-old and fled the country got presented this way, and somebody that was an icon for an entire group of people that helped legitimize their position in cinema I'm just saying that's an argument.
But
I don't think it's a good argument though. Like he didn't have any significant scenes within the story.
I think to me, you could also say the same thing about Charles Manson because Charles Manson was like, "How you doing, neighbor?" And
I know.
We have to spend a ton of time. I'm just saying you could.
Those are weak arguments. That's a weak argument, I think.
But I'm just saying you could I see how people have problems with that, especially people from his family or related to him.
No, I get there's quibbles with that. I'm talking about the Polanski thing.
But it's like I'm just saying that was just like one point of view.
I feel like the people who came out outside of his individual family members, but just people in general who watched that could never watch an episode of Family Guy without being offended. You couldn't watch.
Okay, we have to go down that road too much. I was just saying the one quibble that I had with it, the one thing that kind of stuck out to me after having it more contextualized through hearing how they described the movie, then I was like, okay, so it wasn't. it wasn't them digging at anybody. It was mostly just, this is one character's possibly skewed recollection of something in a fictional universe where Cliff Booth could kill anybody.
I mean,
he
me
wanted.
seeing, most of his films seemingly exist in the same universe. He's always kind of set that up as being like, hey, they're all shared. The Red Apple cigarettes, it may not be MCU, but I'm saying they live in the Tarantino world.
Yeah.
And,
It's an alternate reality.
He killed Hitler, you know what I mean, a couple movies back. So, like, knowing that setup and the context, and this film even being called Once Upon a Time, and then how everything, I just felt like, oh, this is just like, it's a fable. It's somebody unreliable narrator telling you how things quote unquote happened when that,
especially given what happens with the flamethrower, like it's just an over the top ridiculous.
Yes, So Sean,
I make this not hot.
I love this film. I thought it was going to be my film of the year, and I was like, oh, because I liked Hateful Eight a whole lot. And what was the film he did before that?
Django.
Yeah, Django. I was not hot on Django. Okay,
because it was
Django's my least favorite.
Glorious Bastards, Django, Hateful Eight.
Yeah, Django was my least favorite that he's directed so far. But so, and I liked Hateful Eight, but I haven't rewatched it like I did all of his others a lot. I turned it on again. So I was like, okay, I wonder where he's going to land. And I was almost surprised. Love this film. So Knives Out, also loved that film. I can't tell if I'm hotter on that or cooler on that than some people, but it definitely still in my top 10. And actually, the more I think about it, I had so much fun watching it. Just like
I'm definitely going to see it whenever I have a chance. I just haven't.
But I definitely want to get that as soon as it comes out and rewatch it. But it's only this low because I think this year's been so strong.
Yeah.
And I love murder mysteries. Like I was in on it. And even regardless of Star Wars, like I loved Looper as well. I want to see, okay, let's see him bounce back and see what else he does, post being on this huge film. I just thought it was fantastic. Irishman, loved that. Loved, it's a film you can, ruminate on. And I just love that Scorsese got so many people back and then Pacino and everything. I love the performances. Yeah. I just think it's entertaining throughout. I like what it does with what he's trying to say, especially his leanings with gangster films and stuff like that. It is not, everybody knew going in, it's not Goodfellas, I just think it is phenomenal. And truly like the last 45 minutes of that film is just, it's, this isn't plot, but it's the way things go. I didn't expect it to go to a identifiable climax, I think is what I'm thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can watch Goodfellas and things sort of goes here. But I think because this film feels a little fluid, like you're watching things going along and all of a sudden things start catching up to you and you're like, oh wait, oh my God. And for me, it hit me really hard. And I thought it was just so wonderful. And so many of the silent moments with De Niro even. And a lot of people were getting praise of this. Pacino's won awards and Pesci, Pacino's amazing. So many people are amazing in it, but De Niro, so many of the quiet moments are so good. And of course, Anna Paquin, who people have been complaining, she didn't have any dialogue. Well, yeah, the quiet moments with her are so good. Same thing people were saying with Margot Robbie and Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
So, that for me, that was kind of, I was like debating it. But I'm like, I think I picked that over Once Upon a Time, maybe, but then I saw Uncut Gems. And that is just like a roller coaster. Scorsese talking about Marvel films being, they're music rads,
Yeah.
And he's saying that's not all derogatory. I'm not meaning that completely derogatory. They're fun experiences. They're flashy or whatever. Honestly, I walked out of Uncut Gems like it was an amusement ride because I walked off and I had that same sort of high and giddiness and you get off say The Beast at King's Island. You're like, oh man, and you walk off, so you can't help but smile when you walk off because it's been such a rush. And that's how I walked out of that film. And I told you about it. I don't know if I've said it in the chat. I don't think I've said it on here. Sorry if I've repeated it to you, William, but my wife, she said, I don't know if I can sit through that again in theater. Maybe at home, when I can kind of step away, I can. But it was so intense for her that, she was checking her pulse. We watched it at Baxter and we were, Bardstown Road south of Watterson, and her pulse was still going. And I said, check your watch, your Apple Watch on your phone to see your heart rate. And her resting heart rate is at 70. It was at 125 average throughout the film.
Yeah.
And it does that. Robert Altman and to Noah Baumbach, of where people talk over each other. You know, they're just like, and so much it's so frantic and so much is going on that people are just talking over each other, and it's just building and building. And it also does a thing where it's like, oh, you expect things to go one way, and then it smartly takes a left turn or takes a right turn. And it's just, I love Howard, you know, Adam Sandler's character is so good. They just are stellar at casting. Phenomenal film, phenomenal experience. Like, again, that gave me a rush that 1917 I expected to get out of that, you know, and I was almost left a little cold, even though the spectacle was wild. And maybe I was more focused on the spectacle, but this gave me like an adrenaline shot, and I hadn't felt quite like that in a film before. Number 2, I think, of the year. Again, uncut. I don't know where that'll land eventually, but visceral reaction initially was so high. Number 2, Little Women, which I didn't expect it to be that high. Greta Gerwig, I love the work she's done on film. Noah Baumbach stuff too. Loved her.
She was even in like House of the Devil years ago.
Yeah, she was in House of the Devil. You know, first thing I saw her was Greenberg.
Yeah, she was the
she's the best friend.
The one, okay.
You know, Noah Baumbach. I enjoyed his work, and Greenberg. We saw that at Baxter as well. But she's in with that Ben Stiller. First time I saw her, and I was like, you're immediately gravitated towards her. Then he worked with her on like, you know, Frances Ha, Mistress America. She's so good in those, and you know, I just loved her so much. Lady Bird, I really liked. I don't know if I was as hot on it as everybody else. But again, I'd probably give it like a 9 out of 10. You know, some people are like, oh, this is my film of the year.
Well, one thing I kind of like about Lady Bird is that I'm in the weird age group where a lot of high school and middle school directed movies are not in my age. Because like I was born in 1990.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you get these movies, they're set when I would be in middle school or high school or and that was one of those movies I think is set right around the time that I would be in there. Like a TV show, Pin 15. Again, now these are all female-led things, but that's set around about the same age grade as me and the same time. So it's kind of fun to actually get to watch stuff that pertains to more my age group.
Yes.
Or this does. So maybe I connected with it, even though the lifestyle's vastly different. It's like, I never really got those things, you know, like.
Did you watch Super Dark Times?
No.
You watched that, didn't you, William?
Yes.
Yeah, that is.
We're playing like Twisted Metal, PS1.
If you want something that's set around your age, it's set like, you know, mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
And it feels like mid to late 90s.
You all like Boy Meets World. And because that was more closer to you all as far as like your age. And I know it's a TV show.
And where are you going with this?
I'm saying like my age group didn't really get that. Because everything was like pre us, or then when you got older, you're like, okay, now they're doing that, but now I'm too old to watch it. Okay. You know? Whereas like that's what like Labor, because it was kind of around the same, like I would have been around the same age then at the same time. But you don't really I
showed the opening scene of that to some family members recently, you know, opening scene of that film, because we were talking about Jackie from Roseanne, you know. I'm like, oh, she's great in that film. So Little Women, I went in expecting to like it quite a bit, because I just like her. I like listening to her talk about movies too. It had good praise, and it has Florence Pugh? Florence, from Midsummer. So, you know, and I'm not going to say her name, the lead from Lady Bird.
Saoirse Ronan.
Yeah, and then the young girl from, what is that Amy Adams movie or TV show that was on HBO?
Oh, Sharp Objects?
Yeah, she's from Sharp Objects. Anyway, the cast is phenomenal in it. And I had heard people say, oh, it plays with time. Because some people were like, oh, I was having trouble kind of gauging when things take place. I don't think it's that confusing, but what surprised me was how well she uses time in the film, and that the way she tells the story is so, again, she really deconstructed it. Like Kubrick did The Shining. You know, just because we talked about it, how King was not happy with what he did with that, but he made it his own, and she really kind of molded this story, I think, to make it her own, but also tell it in not just an interesting way, in a way that was extremely impactful. And it has so many sweet moments in it that it reminded me of maybe like a Studio Ghibli film sometimes, when there's just small moments of people doing good things that are just sweet, and you're like, oh, they're not saving the world. You know, like Kiki's Delivery Service, the one film I watch a lot with my daughter, but it's just like her helping people throughout the film, you know, and getting help. And it's about people helping people and finding your way. And I feel like this is almost like that. Like there's so many sweet, small moments of people just helping people, even just small things that that's not in movie. You know what I mean? That's not in American films typically, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to go give this person this thing. And it means a lot to them, even though it's not saving the world. And so many of those moments hit me. So I love those moments of the film. But again, just, I like the setting. You know, I never read Little Women, but in grade school, our teachers would read us Little House on the Prairie. You know what I mean? Different things, and I watched the show a little bit. Like for some reason, as I get older, I don't know why I have a nostalgia for that stuff too. But Little Women, I think, is absolutely must watch, especially if you are a filmmaker or somebody who is into cinema at all. Like just to see what she did and how well it worked. But you know, just as a human being, I think you would find something to enjoy in Little Women. I think it was so good. My favorite American film of the year. And again, before that was kind of Irishman or one. Like it trumped all those. I think. I can't believe how good that film is. I almost felt like I didn't want to watch it again anytime soon because I don't want to start deconstructing it. Like, you know, thinking about it too hard. Because it just feels like this perfect thing just handed down. Like it just works. And that's like the best filmmaking that just seems seamless. And it's just like magical. And then my number one of the year, I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast. I think I probably have that I saw it, was Parasite. Not a huge surprise just because I am, you know, a big fan of Bong Joon-ho.
You're a stan.
Yeah, I have been for probably since I saw The Host right around when it came out. And I watched Memories of Murder.
I have no idea what the movie's about, and this is just me being dumb, I guess. I assumed that it was like, maybe I'm wrong. I have no idea what the movie's about. I just think of the anime Parasite, and then that, I'm assuming they have nothing to do with each other.
No, they have nothing to do with. I haven't seen that, but I've heard about it. But there is no physical parasite in the film or anything like that.
I was just again, Asian cinema, and this is bad of me. Parasite anime.
Oh, yeah.
That it? And I've never really been into it. Yeah.
So definitely, I think everybody needs to watch this. Is directing, acting. It stars, oh my gosh, Song Kang-ho, I believe his name is.
Is Scarlett Johansson in it?
No.
They did not cast
No.
With the joke being about the ghost in the shell.
And she said she could play a tree.
Always been a huge fan of his since I saw The Host and went back and watched Memories of Murder, Barking Dogs Don't Bite, and everything he's done since then. But I didn't expect to. This film got a lot of praise, and I saw it in theaters when it was here. But I'm like, oh damn! Like this is maybe his most. I don't want to say elegant, but maybe most focused film. You know what I mean? The story is very focused. It's mostly in a couple locations. It is, and it just feels so. It's like he cuts away so much, and because of that, everything is so. I don't want to say profound, but you see what he's saying with each character. You know what I mean? Like there's a point to everything. It's not like, oh, we're just going to do an ensemble piece and these people are going to throw some lines here or there. Like everything has a piece to the puzzle, and every element, every direction, every line of dialogue, writing, and you know, as he said, it's connecting to people because you know, kind of capitalism is the enemy of many, especially the downtrodden. But it's unexpected in many ways, and I definitely think you should not go in. Try not to watch the trailer. Just watch it. I think it comes out on the 15th on streaming, and then on disc on the 29th. And when it hits disc, you should be able to rent it. So at least rent it, watch it. It is phenomenal. Again, my favorite film of the year.
All right, so favorite films of the year. So Parasite
and Little Women is pretty. You know.
Then you said Once Upon a Hollywood.
Star Wars.
And I would probably say my favorite probably was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as well, with Dr. Sleep, probably number 2. But yeah, so that wraps up our 2019 discussion. So going forward, the podcast will be a monthly release. And we might try to structure those up to be more of like, you know, get guest on or, you know, have more going on and not just discuss a specific movie, have more general topics. and then have kind of more shorter content we release, in the meantime, directly to social or to YouTube or Facebook or whatever. It's like once I said, we're doing shooting 2 short films in February, the tight turnaround.
And those are part of a feature anthology, so they won't be on our YouTube page or anything.
Yeah, whenever the details now get released, we'll reshare them and talk about it more. We may even do a podcast when you have people involved with the project and stuff like that. But yeah, so going forward, the podcast will be once a month, and we'll have probably other shorter content that can go to YouTube. In the meantime, as we kind of just, if I watch something on Netflix, I'm like, oh, I'll do a video on this. So you can keep a lookout for that. But yeah, so that'll wrap up our discussion 2019. Find all this we're doing at hbtvs.com. Find links to all of our social media accounts at Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. You can buy t-shirts now. You can buy t-shirts. They have our logo on them that in and of itself look pretty cool. So it doesn't have to be just in support of us. It's a shirt that just looks pretty cool. They have different versions and colors and a baseball tee and hoodies and all that stuff. So you can check all that out at hbtvs.com. And
thanks for watching for 250 episodes.
Yeah.
Listening and watching. Even that now we're breaking the format, so it's kind of a new year. But
yeah. So it'll be a little bit different format going forward. We'll still have all the old ones out there. The archive, changing the format and everything just as going to Spotify, and it, either is or will be soon. But yeah, so that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Vaysor podcast. Thanks for listening.
House by the